When I died after making my first bad decision, I wasn't expecting to be reborn in a world of devils, angels, fallen angels and yokai. I wasn't expecting to be the main character. I wasn't expecting for my life to become a game. I will, however, make the most of this peculiar situation. SIOC is Issei. Badass Main Character MassHarem. Lemons. Chapter 1. Game over. Not disclaimer. I do not own the gamer manhwa, nor do I own High School DxD or any other non-original concept I put on this. They belong to their rightful owners and I am not making a profit of this fictional work. Please go to the end of the chapter to read the A, and enjoy. Chapter 1. Game over. Not. I really shouldn't have gone drinking that night with my friends. I mean, sure. I had just graduated from high school and I needed to celebrate that somehow, but I had never gone drinking before. I was what you would call a boring guy because I never went out drinking, partying and doing drugs. I just knew better results of spending most of your time reading random stuff on the internet. Anyways, I really shouldn't have gone drinking that night. I should have gone home, celebrated the fact I was out of school with my parents, the ones I knew really gave a damn about what happened to me, and after that I should have done what I do best. Play video games until I gave myself brain damage and passed out until the next morning to repeat the same thing every day until it was time for me to go to college. Hey. College. I was really looking forward to that. I really wanted to get a degree in graphic designs and graphic animation so I could get a job in the video game development industry. Those had been my plans. But fucking no. I had to ruin them just because I couldn't say no. Come with us, they'd said. It will be fun, they'd said. I went with them. And I had fun, made out with 3 different girls, 2 at the same time even. What they didn't tell me, however, was the fact that I was going to stare my own death in the face while I was too drunk to see that the green light was one for the vehicles on the street, not the people walking through the city. I knew how to drive, but my parents knew I was going to go drinking, so they didn't give me the vehicle for obvious reasons. I was supposed to call them so they could pick me up, but in my drunken brilliance I decided to walk home. A load of good shit that did me. I had stumbled forward, ignoring the warning of the homeless guy who was sitting next to the lamppost on that corner, and slowly rose my head when a bright light and an annoying loud sound suddenly blared against my drunken senses. I don't know how I can recall this with even half of the clarity I am, but this is what I remember. That night I saw my life flash before my own eyes before I was hit by a car. I remember half of my bones breaking and puncturing most of my internal organs. The pain had been excruciating. Milliseconds. Don't ask me how I could have perceived such a tiny time frame, because I do not know. After that I felt my head been separated from my body due to the strength which the car had hit me. I remember seeing my body sent flying meters away before my eyes turned to the horrified eyes of the man as he stared back at me. But most of all, I remember 10 words appearing in front of me as everything dulled as I began to die. Game over. Would you like to try again? Yes. No, I don't know if it had been the survival instinct of a dying being making the choice for me. I don't even know if my mind even questioned the absurdity of words appearing out of nowhere as my head flew away from my body. The only thing I knew was that I saw an opportunity to keep living. So, moved by instinct, I said yes in my mind. The words had disappeared. My head continued flying away as my body was crushed by the car that had killed me. My consciousness, however, was transported elsewhere. DxD. Gamer, you have slept in your bed. Your HP and MP have been fully restored. All ailments have been cured. What in the actual fuck? While my thoughts were raging a mile a second, I was sure my face, or what I believed to be my face, was kept blank as I stared at the blue box with black letters in front of me. Not a moment ago I was reflecting of the decisions I took that led to me dying, when I suddenly find myself laying comfortably in a bed staring at a message box suspiciously similar to the ones that appeared on The Gamer manga I have been reading lately. I looked around in panic, trying to discern where I was, but there was nothing distinctive of the room other than it was filled with posters of naked females that were very beautiful and very well endowed. When I was sure I was going to start hyperventilating, a wave of calmness overwhelmed the anxiety I was feeling, and my brain directed my consciousness into thinking about the situation at hand. I was in an unknown place. First priority: learn where I am. Secondary objectives: find out why those letters appeared in front of my face when I woke up, and why they resembled a manga I had been reading in the past, and why I found myself calm all of a sudden when I should be getting a heart attack. That was when another box appeared. Quest alert: where in the hell I am. You have found yourself in an unknown place and weird stuff is happening around you not even 10 seconds after you woke up. Find out where you are. Secondary objectives. Learn about the weird things happening around you. Reward. 500 XP. 1000 XP if the secondary objective is completed. Skillbook. Not being a clueless idiot. I narrowed my eyes at the message box appearing and realized that it was exactly like the ones that would appear before Han Ji-han when he got a quest. Meaning that this weird things were actually the gamer ability manifesting before me in its default form. My deduction was proven correct when the secondary objective in the quest message box became grayed out and a plus sign appeared beside it, meaning I had completed it. When I didn't panic because of this knowledge being learned, I realized this was indeed the real deal and the skill gamer's mind was already changing me. Deciding to go with the flow as I didn't feel like I was in some kind of dream and I distinctly remembered everything from my live to the point I died. I rose up from the bed and went to search for a mirror to look at myself. Maybe it will give me a clue into where I was. I suspected that I was in the world of the gamer for obvious reasons. There was a small mirror in the room and I approached it with some trepidation that was quickly washed away by gamer's mind. I was surprised, however, when brown eyes stared back at me from the surface of the mirror. Dark brown hair was messily sitting on top of my head and it was also framing and slightly above average looking face. I had already deduced who I was, but the letters floating above my head only served to confirm it. Issei Hyodo. LVL1. The gamer I was in the world of high school DxD and apparently my consciousness has replaced that of the main character. Immediately after I thought that a ping was heard in my mind and a message box telling me I had completed the quest appeared. Immediately after a bright light appeared on my suddenly cupped hands as a white thin book appeared in my hands. I heard another ping sound and another message box appeared in front of me. Your level has increased by 1. Your level has increased by 1. Okay, so let me get this straight. I died. Of that I had no doubt. And then I was reborn in the world of one of my favorite anime, manga, light novels series as its main character wielding the abilities of the main character of another series one had recently began to read. Surprisingly or maybe not, I felt not at ease with that revelation but more like content in a very grim fashion. I have to admit that more than once I had wanted to live in a world of fantasy wielding incredible powers, fighting bad guys and doing what it needed to be done with the hot girls that kept appearing on the shows and manga I have read. As I dismissed all the message boxes that had appeared on my field of vision, I realized that this was my chance to do exactly that. The first thing I needed to do was to find out exactly when I was in the timeline of the DxD universe. Looking at myself Issei on the mirror once again, I realized that I couldn't be far from where the light novels began since I looked around Issei's age when that happened. That's when I realized that I did have my memories of my previous life but I didn't possess Issei's from this life. I can recall being friends with Irina Shithu and thinking she was a boy but only that from the past and I was sure it was because I have already saw that in the light novels. The next thing I needed to do was prepare myself for when shit hit the fan. I decided I was going to go by the timeline as it was presented in the light novels and alter it as little as I could because the slightest thing I did could heavily alter how stuff happened. I admit I was afraid of getting caught off guard. Try not being when you were killed because you were caught off guard drunk, and I certainly didn't want to die again. That line of thinking made me recall the book that I was still holding in my hands, so I brought it up to my face. Even though it appeared out of light, it felt like a real book, but according to the quest that rewarded it to me, it was a skill book. I focused on it and as I expected, a blue window appeared. You have acquired the skill book, Mana Manipulation. Would you like to learn this skill? Yes. No. I pressed the yes button and I stared as the book was enveloped in bright light before I absorbed said light. As it died down and the window disappeared automatically, I became aware of the magical energy swirling inside of me and knowledge on how to manipulate it filled my mind. As I began to marvel at the sensation of it, it was like a warm limb deep inside your core waiting to be used. Another window appeared. Mana Manipulation. Passive. LVL Max. Allows the user to freely manipulate mana, which is the energy within most living beings. Passively increases int by 10%. Passively increases mana pool by 10%. I nodded at that and dismissed the window as I moved away from in front of the mirror and took a seat on my bed. I knew that I was still incredibly weak even by the standards of this world and my previous one, but I still needed to know where I stood at the moment. I took a deep breath and decided to use my voice for the first time since waking up as Issei Hyodo. Status. Name. Issei Hyodo title, N, A status, N, A. Race. Human job. The gamer level, LVL3 next level, 0.0%. HP. 325 325 R. 0.5%. 1.6 per minute MP. 907 907 R. 1.4%. 12.7 per minute. STR. 4 VIT. 5 DEX. 3 INT. 33, 30 plus 3. WIS. 14 luck. 10. Stat points. 10 money. $0. I got over the fact that my voice sounded different and that I spoke a different language, even thought I still perceived it as English very fast once I saw my stats. They were definitely better than I was expecting them to be, but to be honest, I was not surprised by them. They actually made a lot of sense once I spent a minute analyzing them. STR was the strength modifier, and it governed the physical damage I could deliver and the amount of weight I could carry. It was pretty accurate as far things go. From what I knew about Issei's character, he never trained nor performed any physical activity before he became a devil and was forced to do so. I was tempted to put points into it immediately, but I knew that since it was so low I could rise it up by training physically and that I should save those points for later. The same happened with Vit and Dex, the vitality and dexterity modifiers respectively. Vitality essentially governed the amount of stamina and max HP I possessed. I deduced that VIT modified the amount of HP on a 25/1 ratio if the amount I had a level 1 was 100 without taking into account my VIT of 5. Dexterity governed how fast I was physically, my reflexes, my reaction time, my coordination, my body awareness and my aptitude for acrobatics and flexibility. The same occurred here as with STR, so the modifier was pretty accurate. Int was the intelligence modifier, and it governed the potential I had to acquire new knowledge and the amount of mana I possessed. And as humbly as possible, I realized that it was very accurate too. Before I died, I had been a very good student. Not only that, but I spent my time reading and learning new stuff along with playing a lot of games that forced me to think things through, so I knew that my mental capabilities were above average. The amount of mana I possessed was also accurate if the same happened with Int and MP as with Vit and HP. A ratio 25/1 if my base MP without taking into account my Int at LVL1 had been 50, half of my initial HP at 100, which was the common on most games if you choose a class with an average affinity for everything, which I knew I was. WIS was the wisdom modifier, and it governed my ability to make the correct decision, how I used the knowledge in my possession and mana regeneration. I think it was also pretty accurate, since I like to think that all the choices I made through my short previous life had been the correct ones except for the one that had made it so my previous life was short of course. It seemed like the regeneration of my mana was directly proportional to the amount of WIS I had calculated in percentages. And the same seemed to happen with my HP. Good to know. Luck was the luck modifier obviously, and it governed, you guessed, how lucky I was. However, I know that it also governs the quality of the drops I get from fighting mobs and how prone I was to getting a critical strike. A lot of people would think that luck is a useless stat to increase, and it normally would be because you can normally raise your stats through stats points, but since I could modify my other stats by training and doing other stuff, I can see the potential here. But I wasn't going to get ahead of myself. Looking at my stats, I realized that I had the perfect build to become a mage class character just going by how high Int and WIS were when I was in level 3, but this game system allowed me to get points in all stats by doing certain actions. I knew I could rise my STR, Vit and Dex by doing specific exercises for each. I could raise my Int by studying, and I could raise my WIS by making correct during difficult situations. Luck was the only one that I needed stats points to raise because there was no way to get lucky on purpose. Because of that, I decided that my best path was to become a battle mage. It was a subclass of wizard-type characters that focused on mixing physical prowess with battle magic to create a very devastating battle style suited to face any kind of situation, which was exactly what I wanted. I wanted to be able to go against anyone who crossed my path. You have made a wise decision. Your WIS has gone up by 1. I smirked as the game itself confirmed that my decision was one of the best I could make. I dismissed the message box and decided to look at my skills. I had a fairly good idea what to expect, but it was a good thing to be sure. Skills. Gamer's Mind. Passive. LVL Max. Allows the user to calmly and logically think things through. Allows peaceful state of mind. grants immunity to psychological status effect. Gamer's body. Passive. LVL Max. Grants a body that allows for the user to live the real world like a game. After sleep in a bed, he restores HP, MP and all status effects. Mana manipulation. Passive. LVL Max. Allows the user to freely manipulate mana, which is the energy within most living beings. Passively increases int by 10%. Passively increases mana pool by 10%. I nodded my head as I looked at the three skills. Like in the gamer manhwa, I began only with the skills Gamer's Body and Gamer's Mind, which were by far the most useful skills. Gamer Body prevented me from having permanent physical damage, and Gamer's Mind allowed me to always be calm and collected no matter the situation. To be honest, Gamer's Mind was a much overpowered ability because I couldn't be affected neither by anxiety, stress or panic attacks, and neither by illusions nor abilities that affected the mind. That meant that my mind was absolutely protected. My body was different. Why any permanent damage would heal with just sleeping or eating anything, I could still feel pain, as brief as it would be. And I wasn't very fond of pain. I had felt most of my bones breaking and puncturing my organs, and unless it was required, I refused to feel something like that again. Let's not talk about how it felt to have your head ripped off. It was not pleasant, to say the least. At the moment I needed a skill to gather information, and the perfect one for that was Observe, which I was going to create in a few minutes. I also needed close, mid and long range skills to attack and dice out damage. I needed a defensive skill to protect myself from damage. And lastly, I needed support skills that augmented my battling prowess. Those were the skills I needed at the moment, and luckily I had enough mana to accomplish at least that for today. Issei. Come down and get your breakfast or you'll be late for school. I perked up at the voice and realized that it was my mother calling for me. Looking at myself, I realized that I was still wearing pajamas and cursed myself for spending so much time marveling at my newfound life and abilities. Deciding to manage my time better for the future, I rushed out of the room and into the bathroom to quickly get myself cleaned up and ready for the day. After brushing my teeth, I exited the bathroom and went into my room with a smirk on my face. I had found out that Issei was very well endowed down there. I mean, it was obvious he was, because there was a reason all those girls were after him, and was feeling very good with myself right now. Recalling another feature that my gaming abilities gave me, I opened up my inventory and put my uniform into it and then equipped it. I was about to put my hairstyle into the one Issei used but stopped short. Smirking again, I decided to start changing things a little, so I grabbed a comb and styled my hair so it was completely brushed back with a bang loosely hanging between my eyes, and the top part of my hair was slightly spiked upwards. After nodding approvingly, I unbuttoned the bottoms of my jacket, exposing the red undershirt beneath. I went out of my room and towards the kitchen. All that only took me 15 minutes. When I arrived at the living room, my mother was already sitting at the table and she was patiently waiting for me, but I had to stop dead when I saw her. I knew that it was wrong in so many levels, but I couldn't help it. I remember that High School DxD was of the ecchi genre, bordering almost on hentai, and I should have been expecting this, but nothing prepared me for the beauty that was Issei's mother. With long brown hair that reached the small of her back, a mature face full of natural beauty, brown eyes full of love, and a full voluptuous figure that was perfectly proportioned with big round breasts, a small waist, super wide hips, and a plump ass, it was no wonder why Issei turned into a pervert. With a mother like her, there was no question how Issei turned the way he did. Issei's that was a lucky bastard. I smiled at her and she returned my smile with a soft one of her own. If she only knew what I was thinking, she wouldn't be smiling like that, of that I was sure. I stared at her for a few more seconds, deciding to use this opportunity to create one of the most useful skills Han Ji-han had acquired. The fact that I was also using this opportunity to strip her down in my mind had nothing to do with my decision. A skill has been created through a special act. The skill, Observe, has been created. Observe. Active. LVL 1, 0.0%, through continuous observation. A skill to observe objects, situations, and persons was generated, allowing the user to quickly gather information. The higher the skill, the greater the data obtained. Cost, 10 megapixels. I wanted to confirm another thing about my abilities. I recalled that Han Ji-han would say the name of the skills to activate them. Instead of that, I focused on the skill I wanted to use and thought about using it. I smirked as I felt the slight drain on my mana and the skill activating before I focused on Issei's mother. Hana Hyodo. LVL 7. The caring mother HP, 400 megapixels, 50. Hana Hyodo is the mother of Issei Hyodo and the one that provides him with everything he needs, be it food, clothes, money and education, as long as she thinks he needs it or has earned it. She loves Issei with all her heart and doesn't want him to end up like his father, who she had recently separated with because he couldn't control his lust around other women. My eyebrows shot up as I read the last part, but I realized that I shouldn't expect things to be exactly like in the light novels of the DxD universe. I myself was an anomaly and my powers were an even bigger one, so Issei's mother having divorced her husband was nothing too surprising, but it was still unexpected. It was a good thing I developed Observe while checking her out, because that was something that I had to know, seeing as I was Issei and I was directly affected by that. "Good morning, Ka-san," I said as I approached the table, and deciding to take advantage of the situation of being the son of this hot piece of female flesh, I wrapped my arms around her neck from behind and kissed her on the cheek. I was rewarded with a beautiful smile for my actions. My, she began in a teasing tone as I took a seat next to her. I used Observe on the traditional Japanese breakfast she had prepared for me to start leveling the skill up, as listen to what she had to say. "Such a good greeting this morning from my handsome son. Do you want something?" I could hear the mirth in her voice as she said that. After swallowing a mouthful of rice and eggs, I turned to her with a smirk of my own. "Nothing of the sort, Ka-san. I just wanted to express how much I love my beautiful mother this morning. It's not always that you have to have an ulterior motive to show love to your mother," I replied with the same mirth on my voice as she had used. She rose an eyebrow at me. "You seem different today, and it has nothing to do with your new hairstyle. It suits you quite well, by the way," she complimented me as she kept staring at me with curious eyes as if searching a reason for my change in character. I knew I appeared nonchalant in the outside, but I was cursing up a storm on the inside. Of course Issei's mother would notice something off with her own son just by exchanging a few words. I had overlooked that in my lustful haze of watching such a beautiful female specimen and didn't take into account the repercussions, but at least she wasn't taking it as seriously, since she was probably thinking it was her son trying to mess with her if the slight amusement in her eyes was anything to go by. So I calmly shrugged my shoulders. "I don't know what you are talking about, Ka-san. I just think that I haven't showed how much I appreciated you and decided to change that. I don't think there is something wrong with that," I said as I allowed Gamer's mind to do its job to keep me calm and collected in situations like this. I have never said such a blatant lie in my life, and it showed because a notification box appeared in front of me less than a second after I stopped talking. A skill has been created through a special act. The skill, Lying, has been created. Lying. Passive. LVL1, 0.0%. A skill that lets you spew lies through your teeth while putting a promising act and making even you believe what you are saying is the truth. 5% chance of lie being believed. Lie successful. She looked at me in amusement for a few seconds before she shrugged her shoulders. "If that's the case, I can't and won't complain. I hope that this isn't a one-time thing, you know," she said before she pinched my cheek and gave me a loving kiss on the other before she leaned back and smiled. "Now if you would stop being a blatant pervert, that would be a godsend," she sighed in defeat as she leveled a disapproving look on me. I chuckled nervously as I knew it was a sore topic for her. "That is a work in progress, Mom. I promise I will get rid of everything perverted on my room, and I'll try to stop being lustful, but..." I trailed off and decided to be a bit bold. I blatantly looked at her wearing clothes that accentuated her figure and jokingly gave a wolf whistle as I smirked. "With a beautiful mother like yourself it will be kind of difficult. But I will try. But I have to say that Dad was an idiot for letting you go." I was rewarded with an almost unnoticeable blush before she swatted me hard on the head. My HP even dropped by 5 when she hit me. "Control yourself, young man. I am your mother," she said sternly, but I still could hear the mirth in her voice. She then stood up and picked up her plate and glass. I stared at her perky and plump ass as she walked away. "Now finish your breakfast or you'll be late for your first day at school." When she said that, 2 Quest message box appeared in front of me. Quest alert. Your mother doesn't likes blatant perverseness, even if she is a closet pervert bigger than even you herself. Get rid of your perverted games, posters and magazines today or tomorrow and show her that you are willing to change your ways for the sake of her feelings. Reward. 1000 XP. Increased closeness with mother. Failure. Decreased closeness with mother. Quest alert. You are dangerously close to being late for school. Finish your breakfast and arrive within 15 minutes to school and start showing your peers that you are not the same Issei from last year. Reward: 1000 XP. Better reputation with the student council. Better reputation with the girls of Kuo Academy. Failure: bad reputation with the student council. Girls of Kuo Academy will think that you are the same pervert from last year. Well, that answered the question on when I was in the DxD timeline. I was at the beginning of Issei's second year in high school, which was more or less a few months before the events of the main storyline began to happen. With my abilities, I deduced that it was enough time to build a solid foundation for my battling style. It was perfect for what I had planned for myself even. I accepted both quests without too much thought. A mini-map appeared on the uppermost left side corner of my field of vision telling me where Kuo Academy was located, and a countdown of 15 minutes appeared right below the map. If I recalled correctly, Kuo Academy was more or less 10 minutes away if you walked leisurely, meaning that if I walked normally I would arrive there with minutes to spare if I got out now. I finished my breakfast quickly and surprised Issei's mother again when I deposited the plates and glass myself on the sink. I kissed her cheek again and gave her a hug, enjoying how soft her body felt pressed against mine, before I said goodbye to her. I picked off my backpack and waved goodbye to my hot mother, who kept staring at me in pleased amusement as she waved back. It was time to make this reality, and all its girls, my bitch. DxD. Gamer. As I walked toward Kuo at slightly faster than normal speed, I spammed observe on everyone I got within my sight. Thanks to that, I found an interesting thing. Normal people's level ranged from 1 to 10 depending on whether they were kids or adults. The only ones that surpassed that level range were athletes, who were rounding on 11 to 13 depending on how fit they looked and how they carried themselves. Thanks to me using observe over and over again, I managed to level the skill twice, meaning that I could see their apparent weaknesses and some additional information. This skill was the ultimate information gathering skill, and I will using it for future endeavors of blackmailing and extortion. I arrived at Kuo Academy with exactly 5 minutes to spare, and I dismissed the quest message box that told me I had successfully completed the quest. I marveled at the sheer size and beauty of the school facilities as I walked towards the front gate. It was massive, and while it was described as such in the light novels, I felt that the anime and manga didn't give it justice to just how big it was. When I stopped looking at the school's buildings, I discreetly began to look at the students, and to my amusement many were giving me almost disbelieving looks. I was on time on the first day to start things off, and secondly, I wasn't staring at girls' tits and asses as I know Issei would normally do. While I took notice on how beautiful all the females are, I wasn't been obvious about it. I just smirked to myself and kept walking forward, doing as if I wasn't noticing it. I reached the school gate and I was caught off guard once again by the beauty of one of the important characters of the DxD plot. Sona Citri was a beautiful bespectacled young woman with short black hair in a bob cut and violet eyes that complemented her incredibly beautiful face. She was petite on the chest area, but her thin waist, wide hips, incredible ass and toned thick legs more than made up for that. I decided to use observe on her before she noticed that I was staring at her. Sona Citri LVL. Heir of the Citri clan HP, MP. Sona Citri is the heir of the Citri clan, one of the 72 pillars of the underworld. She is the president of the student council at the Kuo Academy. She is very strict with her charges but kind and understanding. Her hobbies are playing chess with her friend and rival, Rias Gremory, and studying. She loves her sister dearly, even though she becomes easily exasperated and annoyed by her. It seemed like I was still too much at a low level to get a full scope of her abilities even with observe, which meant that even I had my limits. However, what observe told me was more than enough to get a fair idea on Sona's character. I admit that she is one of the girls I want to get close to, and I decided that I should start appealing to what she likes. I approached the gate and she finally took notice of me, and I noticed she was fairly surprised by my appearance. "Good morning, Hyodo-san. It is a surprise to see you arriving early," she commented in greeting as I approached her. I stopped by her and I noticed many males looking at me with murderous eyes as I began to talk to who I knew was the third most popular girl at the academy. As a matter of fact, a skill has been created through a special act. The skill, Detect Bloodlust, has been created. Detect Bloodlust has gone up by 1. Detect Bloodlust has gone up by 1. Detect Bloodlust has gone up by 1. Detect Bloodlust. Passive. LVL 4, 37.4%. A skill that detects any bloodlust directed at the user. It is an instinctive skill. Detects bloodlust within 20 meters of the target's location. It also alerts the user of the location. I smirked at that and ignored the pitiful attempts at intimidating me away from talking to Sona, so I directed a shrug in her direction. I recalled her alias and that I wasn't supposed to know her real name until later, thankfully. Good morning to you, Keicho. You're looking very lovely today. As for me arriving early, certain situations back at home made me realize that the way I had been acting wasn't the correct one, and I wish to change my ways and how people perceive me. It is my hope to not cause you any problem nor anyone else, I replied as nonchalantly as I could. Lie successful. Sona seemed surprised by my admission, but she gave me an approving nod in my direction. I see. Then I am glad. Your actions last year left a lot to be desired, but if you are willing to change for the better, then whatever happened to you was a good thing, all things considered. I look forward to see you living up to your full potential, she said, and dismissed me with a look. I nodded at her and began to walk away towards the school with the eyes of Sona Sitri glued to my back. As I walked towards where my schedule told me that homeroom was located, I began to spam observe on my fellow students. I managed to get another level on observe by the time I arrived to my classroom and took a seat on the back next to the window. I noticed that I was the only boy at the classroom, but I ignored the surprised looks of the girls when they realized that it was me who had just entered the classroom and that I wasn't ogling them. I can literally feel my reputation with them increasing as I began to look out of the window, my chin resting on the palm of my hand. I was shamelessly abusing of the fact that girls were attracted to guys that seemed to have an aloof kind of personality because it turned them into a mystery they wanted to solve. I hoped it would help with my reputation gains with everyone at the school, which would help to make my life here easier. It was also my hope that a few girls would feel attracted to this new personality I was creating so I could hook up with them and have fun. I was not going to become addicted to this video game ability like Han Ji-han, and seeing as I was living in an absurdly perverted world, then the best way to have fun was to do lewd stuff with girls. And speaking of girls that I wanted to seduce, the three main ones that I had been thinking about stepped into the classroom. Murayama and Katase were the hottest members of the kendo club, and in the anime they beat up Issei and the other two perverts for peeking on them many times. It would be very ironic if I as Issei managed to bed them both, so I decided to do just that. Then there was Aika Kiryu, another hot girl who was known for being a big pervert, probably even bigger than Issei, Matsuda and Motohama themselves. Murayama was a brown-haired girl with an athletic build and fierce hazel-colored eyes that complemented her cute face. Katase was slightly less voluptuous than her friend, but she shared the same athletic build. Her hair was colored a dull pink and her eyes were a warm brown that showed she was kinder than her best friend. I don't know if Issei had peeked on them yet, but judging by the fact that they were equally surprised by me not blatantly staring at them as the other girls, then it was safe to assume he had begun peeking on them this year. Aika, on the other hand, didn't have an athletic build, but her assets were certainly fuller and plumper than those of the other two. I am sure that she would be easiest one to seduce since her lust was on par with that of Issei, Matsuda and Motohama put together. The appreciative look she gave me and the smirk gave it away. A few minutes after the arrival of those three, Matsuda and Motohama arrived and I almost pitied them. The girls gave them disgusted look as they began to blatantly ogle them, and I shook my head in disappointment. Had Issei managed his lust better, he could have had every girl here eating from the palm of his hand, because his only shortcoming was that he was obvious with his lust and perverseness. Yo! Issei! Matsuda called out, and I turned my eyes towards him and Motohama, who were now approaching me. I realized that the girls were now frowning at me in disappointment that I was still friends with the two of them, but I won't be their friend for too much long. Call me cruel all you want, but Motohama and Matsuda were friends with Issei Hyodo, not me. I nodded at them. Good morning to you, Matsuda, Motohama, I replied with as much disinterest I could muster, and I was almost surprised when the two of them began to look at me with narrowed eyes. What have you done to your hair? And what's up with that unenthusiastic greeting? I ran my hand through my hair and shrugged my shoulders. About my hair, I think that I needed to change it, seeing that I want change the way people here perceive me, so you can say I am using it to announce that. As for my greeting, I find it too troublesome to be too chirpy in the morning. I answered both questions in the same tone of voice before I looked at them. It was not surprise they seemed shocked by my admission, as were the ones who had heard me. I wasn't trying to have the entire class hear it, but I was not whispering either. I was speaking normally, actually. Can I ask you two a favor? That seemed to do the trick on bringing them out of their shocked state, and Motohama fixed his glasses as he nodded his head shakily. Yeah, sure. What did you need? I leaned back into my chair and crossed my arms over my chest as I looked at the two most open perverts of Kuo Academy. As you probably know, my mom separated from my dad because he couldn't control his lust around other women even if he was married to my mother. My room is still full of perverted stuff, and I feel like that is a reminder to what my father did to her. It was my hope that you two would be willing to take them away from my hands. I don't want my mother to suffer any more than she had already, and everything I can do to help in that I will do it. Lie successful. Lying has gone up by 1. I mentally dismissed the message box, and I almost smirked at the shocked looks on the faces of Motohama, Matsuda, and those who had been hearing my conversation. I could already feel my reputation with the girls increasing as they realized I was willing to depart of something I liked for the sake of my mom. That had been my intention all along. Katase and Murayama were already looking me in a new light, like most of the girls, and where those hearts on Aika's eyes. Never mind. Ill intent detected. In front of you. As soon as the box appeared in front of my face, I was grabbed by the scruff of my neck by Matsuda. He was glaring daggers at me as he held me up, and I saw Motohama also looking at me in a threatening way. Who are you and what have you done with Issei? He almost growled at me in a comedic fashion. Motohama nodded in agreement. Yeah. The Issei I know would never depart of his precious Eki possessions. So tell us who are and what have you done with our dear Issei? He asked in the same threatening tone. I narrowed my eyes down at them, and I was sure it surprised the others that I wasn't becoming angry at them for being idiots, because I know that is how Issei Hyodo would have reacted. Instead, I began to channel mana through my body to strengthen myself, because what I was about to do required strength I did not possess. I was sure Matsuda was physically stronger than me because he used to do sports, so I needed an advantage here. I was pleasantly surprised when a message box appeared a second after I began to channel mana through my body. A skill has been created through a special act. The skill, Reinforcement, has been created. Reinforcement. Active. LVL1, 0.0%. By channeling mana through your body, you can double your base capabilities, or if you channel your mana through an object, you can double its durability. Increases STR and Dex by 100% when active. Increases object's durability and damage by 100% for 10 days when activated and used on an object. Cost: 30 megapixels. I felt the drain on my mana immediately after the skill activated, and I also felt myself getting a temporary boost to my strength, so calmly I grabbed Matsuda's wrist and forcefully made him release me. I could tell he was surprised by my sudden strength as he immediately let go of my shirt and he cradled his slightly injured wrist. I arranged back my upper clothing before I glared at him. First of all, do not touch me like that ever again. Second of all, if you don't know why I am willing to let go of something I like for the sake of my mother, then I don't see myself speaking to you two ever again. I will take my stuff to your house after school today, I said before I dismissed them with another glare before I went back to look outside the window. I felt their eyes on me for a few more seconds before they moved away towards their seats, probably still disbelief. I could feel my reputation with them decreasing, but my reputation with the rest of the class, the girls mostly, was augmenting steadily, and in my eyes it was more than worth it. A few minutes later, after that silly confrontation, the teacher arrived and he began to give us the introductory speech of the year. I toned him off as I have already gone through this and I could still recall more than 95% of the stuff I was taught in school, so whatever they talked about will not help raise my int. Instead, I began to think about how I could go about recreating some of the most useful skills I have seen in manga, anime and video games. If reinforcement was anything to go by, then everything was literally possible with this game ability of mine as long as I had a good grasp of what I wanted. The amused smirk on my face went unnoticed by everyone in the class. DXD. Gamer lunch came by fairly quick, all things considered, and I was currently sitting under the shade of a tree in the schoolyard eating my lunch of soda and chips. I spent the entire morning thinking about the techniques I needed to develop so I could grow stronger and build the foundation for when shit hit the fan in a couple of months from here. I have already created Observe, Lying, Detect Bloodlust and Reinforcement, and learned mana manipulation from a skill book I earned this morning, so I was set to start developing skills. I needed attack skills that used mana, so I decided to emulate Han-Ji Han, but I will give it my own twist. Instead of the spinning monosphere he created, I would create something that resembled more the Rasengan from the Naruto series. It was too much a strong close-range technique for me to ignore, and the coolness factor of how the technique would look was an added bonus. For mid-range, I will look into a way of making a shotgun-like attack from mana that would hit targets at least 5 meters away from me. For long range, I decided to go with the spinning mana arrows since I couldn't come up with something better at the moment. For defensives techniques, I will try to recreate the Hierro technique from Bleach that the Hollows in Arrancar used along with the layered mana shield Han-Ji Han came up with. It was my hope to increase my mana pool and my mana regeneration rate by a big amount so I could keep those two techniques always on without too much thought. That way I will never be caught off guard because a surprise attack would need to first break through the outer barriers surrounding me and then through my hoped hard as diamond skin. For supportive techniques, I needed one that let me create weapons out of mana and one that would actively augment my speed. Reinforcement augmented my body capabilities, but I needed something more direct. I decided to take inspiration in Bleach and their Ho-Ho techniques. I really hoped that I could recreate Sonito instead of Flash Step because the sound it made resembled that of a jet breaking the sound barrier. It will help with the intimidation and coolness factor. I also realized that I needed a lot of passive and active passive skills that gave me passive boosts. Mana manipulation was a perfect example of what I wanted because it increased my base mana pool and int by 10%. If I could stack up a bunch of passive buffs, then I could become incredibly strong at a relatively low level, which would help me catch most opponents off guard. My gamer ability agreed with the decision I made and rewarded me with 2 WIS points just after I decided to go on that route a few minutes ago. After school ended, I would go home to gather the stuff I would give to Matsuda and Motohama before I would go to the biggest park of the city to create the skills and maybe grind them a little if I had enough time. Thinking of time made me recall the skill ID. Create, and I put it into my must-create list along with ID. Escape. After I built my foundations, I would spam that skill to grind myself and my skills to become stronger on a daily basis. And when I got to the point I could create instant dungeons with a time distortion, then my life will get many, many times easier. I also needed to get in contact with Diedrich. I'm sure that if I unlocked the boosted gear, I will get a passive boost to my abilities and I could make a contract with him. I recalled how Issei gave up his human arm and got a dragon arm in exchange for power to defeat Razor so he could save Rias from marrying. That had me thinking on the possibilities, and I was giddy, but I won't get ahead of myself right now. Skills first and possible Dragonslayer magic later. Ah. Issei Hyodo. There you are. My thoughts were interrupted by a pleasantly husky-sounding voice, and I looked up to see Aika Kiryu approaching me, striding forward with a subtle sway on her waist, an amused smirk on her face, and her eyes were filled with no so innocent intent. I was honestly surprised because I didn't think she would approach me so fast. I was expecting her to approach this new me a few days from now, but I guess she was bolder than what I gave her credit. I nodded at her as I gave her a pleasant smile. Good morning, Aika-san. You are looking lovely today. How can I help you? I asked her and motioned her to take a seat next to me on the bench. She gladly did so after smirking in triumph at the compliment I gave her. I was not surprised when she sat so close to me that our legs were touching and her shoulder was brushing mine ever so slightly. She smelled life wildflowers and it sent a pleasant thrill through my mind and my body. Aika gave me that sexy smirk of her as she looked into my eyes. I want you to ask me one question. Are you really Issei Hyodo? I am not complaining of this new you, but I find it hard to believe that in just 2 months you changed this much. I shrugged my shoulders. Like I said to Matsuda and Motohama, something happened during the break and it caused me to see the errors of how I had been acting towards girls in general. That doesn't mean I'll stop being a pervert. That's impossible, and we both know that. The thing is that I will be more discreet about it. And yes, I am Issei Hyodo. At least as far as I am aware of my own person, I said in slightly joking manner as I smirked at her. Lie successful. Aika hummed in thought before she nodded. I see. If that's the case, then I'm really glad for you. I admit that I always thought you as an attractive fellow, but your blatant perverseness and silliness was a serious turn-off for me, she said easily before smirking widely and putting her hand on my thigh as she leaned forward. Her scent filled my nostrils and I raised an eyebrow at her but kept my own smirk. But I'm seriously liking this new you. Show me that you are really going to change your ways and I will reward you with a date, and if you please me I'll reward you with something even better. Quest alert. The perverted hypocrite attacks. Aika Kiryu has found your new personality unbearably attractive and she is not wasting time on making her move on you. Show her that your change in the way you act is not a one-time thing and that you are serious about changing for the better. Reward: 2000 XP. A date with Ika Kiryu. Increased closeness with Ika Kiryu. Secondary objective: impress Ika Kiryu if you manage to get a date with her. Secondary reward: greatly increased closeness with Ika Kiryu. Kinky sex with Ika Kiryu. New quest. I mentally accepted the quest and I widened my smirk towards her. You've got yourself a deal, Ika-chan. I told her cheekily, and I even managed to say her name in a sexy growl that she absolutely loved if the way she shivered was anything to go by. Definitely liked this side of you better, she said huskily before she gave me a sensual kiss on my cheek. She then stood up and with a smirk still in place she told me, remember, I'll be watching you, Issei Hyodo. Don't disappoint me. With that said, she walked away with the same subtle sway on her hips she had used when she had approached. I stared at her great perky ass. It was noticeable because of the short skirt she wore as I watched her go for a few seconds before I leaned back and looked at the sky. I smirked almost haughtily. Almost. DXD. Gamer school ended that day without nothing else of noting happening. The last classes of the day went by in the same fashion as the first ones before lunch, with the teachers droning out on their plans and objectives for their respective subjects and me ignoring everything they say and thinking of ways on how to become stronger. I arrived at my house and saw a note Issei's mother left on the kitchen saying that she went out shopping. I had been thinking how she got money because I remember her being a housewife, but if her divorcing Issei's father was anything to go by, then she could be working her delicious ass off at an office for all I knew. I will use my improved observe on her when I saw her again so I could know more about her and prevent her from asking questions she didn't want to have the answers for. Other than that, it was really convenient if she wasn't at the house right now. I quickly went into my room and put everything Eki related into a box that I put in my inventory. After that was done, I took a shower and put on a comfortable set of clothes of a nondescript blue shirt, black jeans and sneakers. Then I wrote Issei's mother a note telling her that I will be getting rid of the perverted stuff in my room and that I will be back before 8. I even got a quest that rewarded me with XP and increased closeness with her if I indeed arrived before 8 p.m. rolled around. I of course accepted it before heading out towards Matsuda's house, which I marked on the apparently permanent minimap on my HUD. It didn't take long to arrive to his house and I ringed his bell before stepping back and crossing my arms over my chest after I pulled out the box containing Issei's perverted stuff. I made sure no one was looking of course and waited. Not a minute later and Matsuda's face appeared and it contorted into a surprised expression. I guess he wasn't expecting for me to have been serious. He was about to say something but I stopped him before he could and pointed to the box resting at his feet. Inside that box there is everything perverted I have collected, from magazines and posters to eroges and hentai. I was thinking of selling it but that was too much trouble, so consider it a gift, I said simply before I turned around and walked away. I didn't have to see him to know that he was ignoring me and was instead worshipping the box I left him. Not that I really cared, but the announcement that I have completed the quest of getting rid of that stuff was rewarding. I was even so close to leveling up again that if I went back to the house before 8 I will reach level 4. With that taken care of, I made my way towards one of Kuo's big parks. It take me longer to arrive there since Matsuda's house was further away from the park I had chosen to develop my skills than my house, but the walk was worth it because I was rewarded with a point to VIT by the time I reached the park. I moved towards where I was the less likely to be spotted by anyone and checked the clock on my HUD. It was barely past 3 in the afternoon, meaning that I had more than 4 hours to create the skills I needed and grind them as much as I could. Seeing that more assurance on not been discovered didn't hurt anyone, I decided to develop ID, create first. I focused mana on the palm of my hand and raised my hand to the sky as I concentrated on having the world around me changing but at the same time staying the same. I willed my mana to create an exact copy of the environment surrounding me, but to put said copy and myself on a parallel plane of existence. It took me a few minutes, but in the end I was successful and I watched the world shimmering around me before the sky settled on a red color. A skill has been created through a special act. The skill, ID, create, has been created. ID, create. Active. LVL1, 0.0%, used to create instant dungeons. Stronger instant dungeons may be created at higher levels. Cost, 20 megapixels. Available instant dungeons. Empty ID. Monsters, none. I nodded to myself as I saw this and went to confirm that there was indeed no one. When that was done, I decided to start creating the skills I needed and went to start with the ones I would use to deliver damage. I began with the most basic one, but the one that I was sure was going to be the strongest for quite some time. I gathered mana in the palm of my hand and focused into a ball. I ignored the message box telling me that I created mana sphere. I then focused on the core and began to slowly make the energies within the ball spin in multiple directions at the same time. I realized this wouldn't have been possible had I not acquired the mana manipulation skill, because I was focusing very hard on this even if I knew I was taking the correct steps on developing this technique. A few minutes later the technique was complete and I was surprised to see that it looked exactly like the Rasengan. A skill has been created through a special act. The skill, Spiraling Monosphere, has been created. Spiraling Monosphere. Active. LVL1, 0.0%. A close-range technique developed by the gamer, based on past experiences. Mana is focused on the palm of the hand and is forced to spin in multiple directions while at the same time maintaining the shape of a perfect sphere. 50% defense penetration. 1000% of int damage when taking a direct hit. Cost, 200 megapixels. The first thing I did after I used the newly created skill to destroy a nearby tree was to rename it to Rasengan. After that I began to analyze its properties and found out that I was now a direct hit from Rasengan would cause 330 damage, which was quite a lot considering I was only level 3 almost 4. The cost was fairly accurate since a technique that powerful needed a large supply of mana, and since I was planning on using it as a finisher, then I didn't have an issue with its high cost. Then it came the mid-range technique. I focused mana into the palm of my hand and built it there until I felt it was sufficient energy. I drew my hand back before I threw it forward and released my hold on the energy I had built up as my hand came forward. A blast of spread mana was released from my hand and it forward loosing force the further it went until the energy dispersed into the air. A skill has been created through a special act. The skill, Mana Blast, has been created. Mana Blast. Active. LVL1, 0.0%. A close to mid-range technique developed by the gamer. The user focuses mana into the palm of their hand and it is released as hand is pushed forward towards the enemy. The longer the technique goes, the weaker it becomes. 100% of int concussive damage. 20% chance of causing the stunned ailment. Range, 10 meters. Cost, 20 megapixels. After that skill was created and I used it to almost upturn a small 3 from its roots, I went and developed the spinning mana arrow skill. It was fairly easy and it cost an insignificant amount compared to Rasengan and Mana Blast. I directed the arrow I created and pierced the 3 I had used Mana Blast on previously. I looked towards the part of my HUD that marked how much MP I had left and I still had more than 80% and it was already refilling. I wasn't feeling tired either, so I forgone a break and continued developing the skills I had set myself to develop. The defensive skills were next. Iron Skin. Active, passive. LVL1, 0.0%. A defensive technique developed by the gamer, based on past experiences. The user coats their body in a layer of mana that it's absorbed into the skin, passively strengthening it. The defensive properties of Iron Skin will stack up as the user keeps supplying mana into the skin. Cost, 30 megapixels. Mana Shield. Active. LVL1, 0.0%. One of the most basic defense skills using mana. Handling the energy called mana has existed for a long time, and Mana Shield is one among many. Blocks a portion of the damage depending on the int and the max amount of mana the user has and the power of the attack that it's attempted to be blocked. Cost, 40 megapixels. Maintenance cost, 60 megapixels. The moment I developed Iron Skin, I realized it was a long-term type of skill due to its stacking up feature, and that suited me perfectly, and I was sure I was going to get very fond of the technique. I wasn't too worried about the immense cost of Mana Shield since it will lower as I grinded it up until the point bringing it forward would be the only costly thing. After I was done developing the defensive skills, I went ahead and created the support skills. Weapon Creation. Active. LVL Max. A technique developed by the gamer to create solid weapons from mana. The usefulness of this technique will depend on the knowledge and imagination of the user. Weapons created through this skill will not have a set durability but instead will remain for as long as the user keeps feeding mana to the weapon created. Cost, 40 megapixels to create weapon. 10 megapixels per minute to maintain weapon created. High speed movement. Active. LVL1, 0.0%. A technique developed by the gamer, based on past experiences. The user focuses mana on their legs and takes a step as he releases the built-up mana in a bursts, making them reach incredible speeds for as long as that step reaches. With enough experience, the user can easily break the sound barrier with this technique. Cost per step: 10 megapixels. After I created something that was as close as I was going to get to Flash Step or Sonito, I'm so glad its cost is insignificant. I recalled two other skills that were very useful. The first one was directly involved with what I decided was going to be my main weapon of choice: swords. The second one, however, made me apprehensive for what I needed to do created, but Gamer's Mind did its thing and made me convince myself that it was necessary to further myself towards my goals. Using weapon creation, I created a generic double-edged one-handed sword and gave it a few swings against a tree, slashing it deeply until a message box appeared. The sword disappeared in blue particles of light as I read the new message. A skill has been created through a special act. The skill, Sword Mastery, has been created. Sword Mastery. Passive. LVL1, 0.0%. Allows user to freely handle any type of swords. 5% increase in attack damage with swords. 5% increase in attack speed with swords. I dismissed the message box with a wave of my hand before sighing and groaning at what I was going to do next. I walked forward towards one of trees and prepared myself mentally to what I was about to do. Gamer's Mind helped a lot, and after the 5th time I took a deep breath, I reared my hand back, curled into a fist and punched the tree with all my strength without using mana. I cried out in agony as I felt the bones of my hand breaking and my wrist dislocating. I cradled my hand and noticed through teary eyes that while I felt the effects of me punching the tree, my hand did not break nor my wrist was dislocated, but my HP had dropped by almost 10%. A few seconds later the pain stopped and a new message box appeared. A skill has been created through a special and stupid act. The skill, Physical Endurance, has been created. Physical Endurance. Passive. LVL1, 0.0%. The body's durability increases, allowing for less damage taken. 2% decrease in damage taken by attacks. I decided to call it a day after I was finished creating the support skills. I have been at it for more than 3 hours and my mana pool was almost depleted with less than 10% of it remaining, but I still had enough mana for the final skill I was going to create that day. I focused mana into my hand and raised it high in the sky before telling it to take me out of the place it had created and to deliver me back to where I had come from. 10 minutes later everything around me broke as if it was made off glass and all the damage I had caused to the park disappeared as if it hadn't been there on the first place. A skill has been created through a special act. The skill, ID, Escape, has been created. ID. Escape. Active. LVL1, 0.0%. Used to escape instant dungeons. Looking up to the sky, I realized that it was already tinted a slightly dark orange, meaning that night was nearing and it was time for me to return home. Tomorrow I will come back to grind my skills as much as I could, because the day after tomorrow I will be doing some undead hunting. You must be thinking right now, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god. He is back. The man is back. He will update his older stories, especially Den. Yes. Woohoo. Sorry to burst your bubbles, but I don't think I'll be writing Deus Ex Naruto. It doesn't really have a direction and it was just a lemon fest, which it isn't bad per se, but I guess I just wanted something more meaningful in my writes. So I came up with this. I became enamored with the concept of the gamer and I have recently read all the volumes on the high school DxD light novels. So I decided to do a pseudo SIOC as Issei with the gamer abilities. It will be a story filled with action badassery on the main character's part. Romance, a lot of lemons because I am still a pervert in whatever I come up with. I'll be posting a character sheet on a different story with each chapter so you can keep track of the main character's progress each chapter, which I promise will always be significant. This sheets will describe the stats of the main character at the end of each chapter along with all the skills, details and their current levels. You'll say what I mean. No, go and read the next installment. I'll try to post 3 chapters a month at least, but I make no promises, but you should at least get 2 chapters. Ch1 of 10 next, Chapter 2. Spoilers are not always bad. Disclaimer. I do not own the gamer manhwa, nor do I own High School DxD or any other non-original concept I put on this. They belong to their rightful owners and I am not making a profit of this fictional work. Please go to the end of the chapter to read the A, and enjoy. Chapter 2. Spoilers are not always bad. You have slept in your bed. Your HP and MP have been fully restored. All ailments have been cured. I woke up the next morning feeling as refreshed as ever. My bed was very comfortable and with my gamer ability curing everything I could possibly have with just 8 hours of sleep, then it was no wonder I woke up feeling refreshed. My good humor also had to do with the fact that I had leveled up yesterday immediately after completing the quest of returning home by the time I wrote I was going to return. After that followed a cheerful dinner and I even helped Mom with the dishes, which also earned me some good XP and very much desired reputation points with her. I was well on my road on banging Issei's mother and I felt damn proud of myself, so cut me some slack, okay. I looked at the clock on my HUD and noticed that it was 5 in the morning, 3 hours before the time I needed to be at school, which gave me exactly 2 hours to start grinding stats points by doing physical activity. I already told Issei's mother my plans and she was once again pleasantly surprised by my decision of start exercising. I had to tell her that it would help me stop thinking about females at the time, so she accepted it without too much issue. She was even proud and I got more reputation points with her, which was a plus. Oh, and when I used Observe again on her, I found out that she had put the substantial amount of money she had gotten from my dad into the bank and she was being paid by the bank because she was letting them use her money for investments and stuff. According to that we were pretty much loaded, but if we took into account the fact that I could basically create legit money. I equipped a generic red-colored tracksuit and the most comfortable sneakers I owned before I sneaked out of the house, trying to make as little sound I could. I wasn't surprised when a box appeared in front of my face telling me I earned a new skill for doing that. A new skill has been created through a special act. The skill, Stealth, has been created. Stealth. Active, passive. LVL 1, 0.0%. Stealth is the one of the bases of combat. If you can go through your enemies undetected, then it's half of the battle won. You only have to hit them to put them down for good. Passively increases perception of surroundings by 10%. When actively using stealth, chances for getting a critical hit are augmented by 200%. Cost, 15 megapixels. I gave a pleased smile as I thought of the possible uses I could give to this skill in combat situations before they even started, before I dismissed the message and began to limber up for my run. I stretched my extremities until I felt they weren't stiff before I gave a few jumps in place to warm up. 5 minutes after my warm-up began, I felt ready and began to throttle at a steady pace, making sure to breathe correctly and keep my core tight to get the most out of the exercise. I traced a route that will have me running for an hour more or less until I arrived at the park, which was actually a 15-minute walk away from my home, where I would do other exercises for 45 minutes, giving me enough time to go back home to get ready for school with time to spare to get there on time. 10 minutes into the run I got bored. Oh sure, I was already getting out of breath, but I didn't want to think about it, so I decided to get myself some headphones and put some badass music into it, which would motivate me into continued exercising without giving it too much thought. You could go longer and push yourself forward if you weren't thinking about how tired you were, so if I got some music to concentrate on, then I won't feel as tired as I was feeling at the moment. I barely managed to complete my run and I arrived at the park at the mark of 1 hour and 10 minutes. It seemed like I was not still in the condition I required to make that route under an hour, and I made that my goal for the next few days. I was at least rewarded 1 point to VIT for doing the run, so feeling nauseous at the moment was worth it. Thanks to all the deities out there, I didn't eat anything before I began this madness. What followed next after a short break, of course, was me attempting to correctly do the most push-ups, sit-ups and squats my poor physical capabilities allowed me. It was excruciating. It was painful. But it was fucking worth it. By the time 45 minutes rolled around, I had gotten another point for VIT, and 1 point for both STR and Dex. And now let me tell you a secret about working out. It was all about destroying your muscles so they would heal and become stronger than what they previously were, and this is where GamerBody allowed me to cheat. Any damage done to my body would immediately heal, meaning that I did not have to wait days to see the result of my physical training. That was why my stats points rose so fast. My body was practically healing the damage and adapting as it was done. I still needed to put more effort into training the stronger I got, but I would at least see the results right away. Like Sun Il would claim constantly, the gamer ability is seriously broken, but I wasn't complaining. Anyways, since I was done with what I decided was going to be my daily workout until further notice, I began to hastily make my way back to the house. There were people already walking through the street and I wasn't going to let the opportunity to waste. I spammed observe on them. I didn't get a new level, but I managed to grind it significantly. Like any other game, the stronger you got the harder it'll be to grow, but to me that just made it all the more interesting. When I arrived at the house, I was tempted to give Issei's mother a joking hug, seeing as I was sweaty as hell, but decided against it the moment she gave me the most evil eyes I have ever seen in my life. Detect bloodlust even went up by a level, and I was even rewarded by a whiz point for deciding against doing that. I guess it was the wisest decision I have ever made in both lives. I quickly cleaned myself up, and when I was done I equipped my uniform and combed my hair into the same style as yesterday. I didn't notice it before, but I kind of looked like Sosuke Aizen from Bleach and it somehow suited me. I shrugged my shoulders. The more badass I looked, the better. When that was done, I went down and had breakfast with my mother, who looked like she was flaying clouds, and I was sure it was due to the fact that I had gotten rid of my perverted stuff. She had been overjoyed yesterday and it seemed like her good mood was going to last for a while, and I have an internal smirk. I won't be long before I could have sex with her on a daily basis, and I couldn't really wait. I took my plates to the counter and looked at her as picked off my backpack. After school I'll spend some time catching up with a few friends from the last year. I'll be home roughly by the same time as yesterday. Would that be okay? Lie successful. I did not feel bad for lying to her, since while I was doing what I was doing for painfully obvious selfish reason, as long as I could protect her, then it wasn't wrong in my mind. She nodded her head at me with a gracious smile. Of course, eyes. As long as you don't go looking for unnecessary trouble, get good grades and get home before too late, I don't have a problem with you being outside the house, she replied calmly before taking a sip of her coffee. I grinned at her and gave her incredibly smooth cheek a kiss that I knew just made her day and increased a lot my reputation with her. Thanks, Mom. You are the best, I declared with conviction as I gave her a loving look. She winked at me and haughtily flipped back her hair. Of course I am. Anyways, off you go, young man, or you'll be late. I will be doing some errands during the day, but I'm sure I'll be done before you come home, so you won't have to wait long for dinner. I nodded at her and gave her a wave goodbye before I went out of the house. The moment I stepped out, 2 quests appeared. They were the same as yesterday about no arriving late at school and at home, with the difference that they only gave me reputation gains. I nodded as I accepted the quests and began to make my way towards the school. I hoped that today would be as interesting as yesterday. DXD. Gamer. Through the school day, nothing of interest really happened other than surprising Sona by arriving early once again 2 days in a row, which also earned me very appreciated reputation points with her, and another confrontation with Matsuda and Motohama about me going to the light side. I had dismissed them again, earning more reputation points with the girls at school, and instead used the time to grind observe. I used it on everyone I came across and managed to get another level on it, putting it at level 5. I needed 3 more levels on it before I could see the stats on the objective. Another thing that happened was another conversation with Aika during lunchtime, in which she commended me on my dismissal of Motohama and Matsuda, and she reminded me that she was watching me closely before she sexily had sauntered off, driving me more than a little crazy. It had been then when I felt the eyes of a person on me, and I turned to the source to see the impossibly beautiful Rias Gremory looking at me curiously. I had used observe on her and was not surprised at what had come up. Rias Gremory LVL? Heir of the Gremory clan HP. MP. Rias Gremory is the heir of the Gremory clan, one of the 72 pillars of the underworld. Rias is very kind, soft and loyal to her servants, and she treats them as family. Rias loves her family dearly but becomes exasperated by them quite easily. At the moment, a rift is being created between her and her family due to them insisting on the arranged marriage even against her will. She hopes someone will be able to help her deal with that before it comes to pass. When I realized that she was watching me, then it meant that the events of the DXD story happened quite early in the year and that I had less time than what I had expected. I admit that what I was doing was for purely selfish reason, but I didn't want anyone who didn't deserve it to suffer, so my resolution grew to become stronger. I had smiled at her and waved, and she had seemed surprised for a second before she had returned the smile with one of her own and waved back. That moment I had also realized that I could protect and be the cause of that smile, and that was something I decided to do. After lunch break I had been pretty impatient for school to finish, and when it finally did I began to make my way out of the school to reach the park I used yesterday to develop my current skills. My plan for today was to grind them all as much as I could, and then tomorrow I will tackle the zombie ID to start grinding character levels and skill levels in the more normal fashion. The plan was however met with a setback when not too far from the school I saw Katase and Murayama being harassed by a group of what you would call generic thugs. They were all wearing black leather and their hairstyles ranged from mohawks to bad imitations of Elvis Presley's incredible hairstyle. I used observe on them and was not impressed by what I saw. Lowly Thug. LVL8. A despicable member of society who does nothing other than harass girls and steal from respectable men. HP. 400 400ths of a megapixel, 50/50 Lowly Thug. LVL8. A despicable member of society who does nothing other than harass girls and steal from respectable men. HP. 400 400ths of a megapixel, 50/50 Lowly Thug. LVL8. A despicable member of society who does nothing other than harass girls and steal from respectable men. HP. 400 400ths of a megapixel, 50/50 Lowly Thug. LVL8. A despicable member of society who does nothing other than harass girls and steal from respectable men. HP. 400 400ths of a megapixel, 50/50 Lowly Thug. LVL9. A despicable member of society who does nothing other than harass girls and steal from respectable men. HP. 450 450ths of a megapixel, 50/50 Lowly Thug. LVL9. A despicable member of society who does nothing other than harass girls and steal from respectable men. HP. 450 450ths of a megapixel, 50/50 Lieutenant Thug. LVL11. A despicable member of society who does nothing other than harass girls and steal from respectable men. He is stronger than his minions but not by much. HP. 800 800ths of a megapixel, 100 100ths. I quickly realized what they wanted, since their lustful eyes and the way they were leering at them was anything to go by, and judging by the expression on Murayama's and Katase's, they were also aware of their intentions. While I couldn't fault them, because those two were hot, what they were trying to do was despicable, only passable in roleplaying, of course. Anyways, the only real threat was that Lieutenant Thug, and seeing that Katase and Murayama were carrying their shinai and they were individually higher level than him, then could deal with him and I could help with the lowly thugs. Why were these humans treated as mobs? I eventually shrugged and chalked it up to game mechanics and logic. Quest alert. Rescue the princesses that don't really need help. Mina Murayama and Miko Katase are being sexually harassed by lowly thugs and their lieutenant. Help them by taking care of the lowly thugs and show them how much a badass you are and how much you have changed. Rewards. 2000 XP. Greatly increased closeness with Miko Katase. Greatly increased closeness with Mina Murayama. Failure. Decreased reputation with Miko Katase and Mina Murayama. A wasted opportunity. I quickly accepted the quest, and immediately after the thugs advanced on Murayama and Katase, who tensed as they began to reach for their shinai in preparation. Seeing this, I decided to prepare myself for a fight, the first one since coming here. I quickly realized I used reinforcement on my body, and since my MP regen was half of what it cost, then I could keep it active for quite some time, seeing as the amount of mana I in comparison to the amount of mana I was spending per minute, meaning that I now had double the STR and dex for the duration of this fight. For the lowly thugs, I supposed it would be enough. I then activated stealth and quickly sneaked behind one of the lowly thugs. Nobody took notice of my presence, and stealth even went up by a level, much to my pleasure. When I was within striking range of the thug, I drew my hand back with all the strength I could muster in my reinforced body and punched him heavily on the back of his head. He fell down into the floor like a sack of potatoes with surely a concussion. Critical hit. I paid the message box no mind and moved to the closest lowly thug and delivered a backhanded punch into his temple, sending him to the ground too. It was also a critical hit due to where I hit him, and he, like the first one, was rendered immediately unconscious and out of the fight. I ran towards the third one and kicked him in the balls. It was a dick move, but it was necessary if I wanted to complete the quest. I was rewarded with another critical hit and another unconscious lowly thug. I'm sure he lost his ability to have children, but I couldn't care less about that. I checked their remaining HP with observe, and while I had just taken away around half of their max HP, I have given them the unconscious status, probably due to the nature of my blows and the pain I delivered with them. What the? I heard the leader of the crew shout as he realized 3 of his cronies have been rendered unconscious in less than 10 seconds by admittedly a scrawny-looking teen. The shock gave way to anger quickly enough and he snarled. "Kill that motherfucker," he shouted, and not a second later Katase and Murayama were on him with their shinai swinging fast and gracefully in a deadly dance. The lieutenant thug pulled out a bat from somewhere, game logic I suppose, and began to defend himself, but I'm sure it won't be enough to deal with Katase and Murayama. I couldn't appreciate the impressive display, however, as the 3 remaining thugs advanced on me, their faces pulled into horrendous snarls of anger and hate. I felt nervous, knowing that I didn't have the element of surprise anymore. But Gamer's mind calmed me and my head was cleared. They had numbers on me, but I was definitely smarter, and thanks to reinforcement I was probably stronger and more skilled than them. I had this on the bag, but I had to be smart about it. I smirked as I made a "come hitter" motion with my left hand. "Why are you guys taking your time? Come and get me. Or, let me guess, are you afraid I will punch the living daylights out of you like I did to your worthless friends?" A new skill has been created through a special act. The skill, Taunt, has been created. Taunt. Active. LVL 1, 0.0%. You know when to be an asshole to rile up your enemies into attacking you and make foolish mistakes. Taunted enemies will gain a boost of 100% in their strength but will make stupid mistakes in their anger. Well, I wasn't expecting that, but it was appreciated very much. I saw the 3 of them becoming angrier before they ran towards me to give me the beating of my life, as if I would let them. The first one reached me and he tried to punch me on my face, but it was slow and telegraphed. It had power behind it, probably enough to seriously injure me, but like I said, it was slow and my mind directed my body into what to do. I grabbed him by his forearm as I stepped to the side and used his momentum and my own strength to twist around myself, and I sent him directly into the path of the second thug. They collided into each other and a generous chunk of their HP was taken away by the very hard hit they suffered. They were sputtering in pain on the floor and they won't be getting up in at least a minute, meaning that I had time to deal with the last thug until those 2 recovered. The only standing thug was a few feet away from me when I turned towards him and he lashed towards my head with punch that I managed duck under thanks to my higher dex, and I moved into his guard, shoving a hard elbow blow into his stomach that almost doubled him over. I stepped back a little before twisting my body to the left, pivoting with my right leg, and delivered a roundhouse kick to his temple. I sent him flying a few feet, and with observe I saw he was unconscious the moment he hit the ground. Then I turned towards the 2 remaining thugs who were now trying to rise to their feet. I rapidly walked towards them and I Spartan kicked him on the side of his face back to the ground and finished him up with another kick to his head that rendered him unconscious. The last thug was about to run towards me if I read his intentions right, but I swiftly neared him, grabbed his head with my hands and pulled it down as my knee rose. The result was a broken nose, and for the last thug to be pulled into unconsciousness as he bled from his nose. A new skill has been created through a special act. The skill, Hand-to-Hand Combat, has been created. Hand-to-Hand Combat. Passive. LVL 1, 0.0%. Hand-to-hand combat is the art of using your body to attack your enemies and also using it to defend yourself from unharmed and harmed enemies alike. Increases STR and Dex by 10%. By fighting against multiple opponents, STR and Dex rise by 1. By fighting against multiple opponents, VIT rises by 2. Quest completed. Your level has increased by 1. I looked at the announcements and smirked in triumph, knowing what this meant for me. It seemed like things were going to be easier than what I was expecting, but seeing that I basically came from another dimension, then it was understandable. No. Meh. I don't care. I just wanted to become powerful, get an harem in the process, and look like a badass while doing it. It was not a lot to ask for, and it seemed like the universe, Gaia, I don't know what, but it was on my side. I dismissed the alert boxes and looked towards where Katase and Murayama were fighting to see Murayama deliver a strike to the lieutenant's gut, making him double over, and for Katase to finish him off with a hard blow to his head. He was rendered unconscious, but other than a quick observe, I didn't pay him too much attention as I instead focused on Murayama and Katase with a slightly concerned look on my face that was partially faked. Are you two okay? I asked them before I made a show of looking at their slightly ruffled states and then at the unconscious thug. I chuckled sheepishly, scratching the back of my head. I guess I should be asking him that question instead. Murayama smirked almost haughtily while Katase gave me a small smile. The concern is appreciated, Issei-san. As was the help, said the pink-haired one of the pair and the most gentle of the two as she looked at the 6 unconscious thugs behind me. I wasn't aware you knew martial arts, she mused, and I could see the interest in her eyes as she looked at me. Murayama kept her smirk in place as she whistled when she looked at the prone bodies. First you stopped being a worthless pervert and now it turns out you can fight pretty well. You have been certainly keeping secrets from us, Issei-san, she said with a teasing tone as she put her shinai away, as did Kataise. I shrugged my shoulders. Like I said yesterday, I became aware of some things and realized I couldn't be blatantly looking at girls because it will only bring forth problems for me in the future. As for me fighting like I do, well, that's also a quite recent development if I'm honest, I said, almost smirking, but I held back to appear nonchalant about the fact. Cool, collected and somewhat aloof. That was what attracted girls. You kept them by being romantic and all the lovey-dovey stuff after all. And it seems that fighting has its uses after all. Kataise nodded in agreement. Indeed. While I was sure Mina and I would have been able to get rid of these guys easily on our own, I'm glad you helped Issei. If there is anything we could do to repay you, she trailed off and she gave me an expectant look. There was a smirk on Murayama's Mina's face as she also gave me the same look, and I realized this was a test to see if I was really going to change my perverted ways. I almost smirked myself but held that in and shrugged my shoulders, getting surprised looks from them. Reward? Nah. What are you talking about? I didn't do this expecting a reward. I did this hoping to help 2 of my cute classmates that were being harassed. If you want to reward me, I'll accept it, but I don't really ask for anything. It took them a moment to process what I had just said, and Kataise gave me an impressed look and there was a wider smile on her cute face, and Murayama smirked at me in approval. You are seriously going to change, eh? She asked rhetorically. I am. Kataise nodded her head. Then if not for helping us, then let's reward you for going out of your way to stop being a nuisance to us girls. Would you like to hang out with us tomorrow after school? We don't have club activities and I think I can speak for both of us when I see that Mina and I want to know this new you, she proposed with disarming and cute smile on her face. I saw Murayama nodding in agreement and shrugged my shoulders and returned her smile with one of my own. Sure. Why not? I'll be a fool to not to accept such a proposal from 2 beautiful girls, won't I? I said rhetorically, and I almost smirked as they blushed a little and giggled. This was proof enough that what attracted girl wasn't physical attributes, though they certainly played their role, but attitude. And my current one was doing wonders for myself. Murayama then nodded at me. We'll see you tomorrow then. Let's go, Miko, she said before she grabbed her friend's hand and they began to walk away. I stood in between the beaten thugs watching them walk away, staring at their swaying backsides, and I have to admit that it was quite the great view. Quest alert. 2 girls. Double the fun. You have greatly impressed Mina Murayama and Miko Kataise with your desire to change your blatant perverted ways and your ability to fight. They have invited you to spend an afternoon with them hanging out. Use this opportunity to impress them further. Rewards. 1000 XP. Greatly increased closeness with Mina Murayama. Greatly increased closeness with Miko Kataise. A good time with Mina Murayama and Miko Kataise. Failure. Greatly decreased closeness with Mina Murayama and Miko Kataise. Mina Murayama and Miko Kataise. They'll be excellent additions to my harem once I got my hands into them, and if the quest was anything to go by, then it will happen way sooner than what I was expecting, like it happened with Aika. I wasn't going to complain, however. Not in 1,000 years. I closed the window mentally and looked around to most curiously note that none seemed to be on the streets. I rose an eyebrow at that but shrugged it off as coincidence before I moved towards the thugs and liberated them from the money they carried on their person. Even though I collected it in yen, when I put into my inventory it converted into dollars, but I shrugged it off too as game mechanics. After that was done, I quickly abandoned the area, whistling a merry tone as my hands slipped into my pockets. It was time to grind some. DXD. Gamer. I arrived at the same park from yesterday, and after moving to a secluded part of it surrounded by numerous trees, I used ID. Create to move myself from my home dimension to the one of my own creation. It rhymed. After that was done, I checked my new stats to confirm what I briefly thought about after I finished the last quest, which granted me another level. Name. Issei Hyodo. Title. N. A. Status. N. A. Race. Human. Job. The Gamer. Level. LVL 5. Next level. 1.9% hydrogen phosphide. 550 are 1%, 5.5 per minute. MP 930 seconds are 1.8%, 16.8 per minute. STR 6.6, 6 plus 0.6. VIT 10 dex 5.5, 5 plus 0.5, int 33, 30 plus 3, wis 18 luck 10. Stat points 20 money, $300. Just like I thought I had 20 points to spend on stats, and my mana regeneration increased with both the augmenting of my mana pool, whether it was by leveling up or by increasing my int, and my wis. As those two were right now, it would quite impractical for me to grind and fight, but luckily my int was already pretty high and I had the points to quickly correct that right now. So without too much preamble, I put the 20 points into int, increased the base stat to 50, putting it at a total of 55 thanks to the passive boost mana manipulation gave me. Not a second later, 3 alert windows appeared in front of my face and I smirked as I looked at them. It seemed like, different from the manhwa, I will gain 2 passive skills and a random active skill every 50 base points per stat. That was awesome. The skill, Mana Affinity, has been granted by reaching 50 on int. The skill, Medium Mana Capacity, has been granted by reaching 50 on int. The skill, Knowledge Absorption, has been granted by reaching 50 on int. Mana Affinity. Passive. LVL Max. A skill that allows the user to become more sensitive to mana and handle it better. 10% increase in MP recovery rate. 5% increase in total MP amount. 5% increase in magic attack. 5% increase in magic defense. 30% increase in MP-related skill effects. Medium Mana Capacity. Passive. LVL Max. An ability given to the few users that are born with an exceptional ability to handle mana. Mana-based attacks are 15% stronger. Uses 10% less mana for all abilities. Knowledge Absorption. Active. LVL1, 0.0%. A skill that allows the user to use mana to directly absorb the knowledge from any written source. The time spent to absorb the knowledge depends on the amount of knowledge and the amount of mana used. Cost depends on the user. I closed the new windows after basking in the feeling of increasing exponentially in power and becoming more in tune with my mana before I opened my status window and my skill window to see how much my actions have affected, and I was more than pleased. I now had almost 1600 MP and my mana regeneration rate was above 30, which was pretty damn good. The cost of the skills had dropped fairly and I couldn't be bothered to check how much damage I could dish out now, but I was sure it was significantly more than yesterday. And the funny thing was that I wasn't done. I sat down on the comfortable grass and leaned my back into the bark of tree behind me and took a deep breath as I relaxed. I then began to count, focusing on the numbers and forgetting about everything else. It was very easy to do, seeing as I had a very gamer's mind, high int, and I was sure my wis also had role in how easy it was for me to concentrate on what I wanted to do. A new skill has been created through a special act. The skill, Meditation, has been created. Meditation. Active. LVL1, 0.0%. Through continuous inner focus, a skill to sharpen focus, order thoughts, and increase clarity of mind and awareness of body was created. Passively increases VIT, int and wis by 20%. HP and MP regeneration increase by 100% when active. Warning. Cannot be activated during combat. With that done, I now sported 1800 MP and a recovery rate of 42 per minute. My HP also increased to 600 thanks to the bonus meditation gave my VIT. A part of me wondered if I was growing too fast in power, but I ruthlessly squashed it. I recalled that DXD character normally grew strong fast. Issei was the best example, but the gamer ability would take that growing rate and multiply it many times over. So I guess I was growing fast, but not as much as one would think without this ability. And now I felt ready to start grinding my skills. I looked at the time on my HUD and realized that I had more or less 6 hours to level up my skills as much as I could to get ready for tomorrow, which was when I would tackle the ID zombie to grind my levels and that of my skills further. It was the reason why I spent those points. I was low level, yes, but I was way stronger than what my level would suggest just because the skills I have gotten. Meaning that at this point raising levels will be literally a piece of cake. And since I will grow stronger as I rose levels. Letting that sink in, I decided that it was time to begin. The first thing I did was to activate meditation, which put my MP regeneration rate at 8.4. Then I activated Mana Shield, the transparent blue sphere of protective energy, forming into existence into a cocoon around me. While activation the skill now cost me 36 and maintaining it cost me 54. My MP didn't go down since the process of activating it and maintaining it were independent from each other. I still had 30 MP on my RR, so I activated reinforcement, which now cost 27, and decided to grind those two skills at the same time, seeing that I only needed to keep them activated for them to rise. It only took 10 minutes for them to go up by 2 levels, and it took twice that amount of time to get one more level. By the time an hour and a half passed, the two skills barely reached level 5 and I stopped feeding mana to the skills and let out a breath as I relaxed. Reinforcement and Mana Shield were not at level 5 each, and their effects had improved a bit and their cost had dropped a little too. Meditation went up by 2 levels in that time as well, but nothing seemed to change with the skill. Satisfied with the results, I activated meditation and then reinforcement again. Then I activated Iron Skin and began to feed mana into my skin, and I suddenly saw a new bar appear above my HP, but instead of green it was colored purple and the acronym DP was next to it. The numbers began to increase as I kept using Iron Skin every second by 1. DP probably stood for defense points, and if I was correct, that bar must be depleted before my HP began to get hit directly. That was incredibly useful and another reassurance to my life. Seeing that I had MP to spare, I formed a spinning magic arrow and launched it towards a tree and saw it explode against it, doing some damage. Smiling as I saw that my MP bar was untouched, I began to continuously fire arrows at the tree, and by the time it was destroyed I had gotten another level and the amount of arrows I could create increased by 1. That meant that each non-par level of the skill I will get to increase the number of arrows I could do at a time. Smile widening, I directed the arrows to another tree and began my barrage in earnest. I spent an hour and a half doing just that, and reinforcement went up by another level. It was at the point that I knew I needed to use it on battle to increase its level fast. When I reached the hour and a half mark, Iron Skin reached level 5 and the amount of MP it consumed went down along with the amount of DP per second it gave me increased by 1. Spinning Magic Arrow went up to level 7 easily, and the number of arrows I could create at a time were 4, and the cost was reduced by 1 when it had reached level 5. Meditation also got 1 level, but nothing changed again. I relaxed again with deep sigh and appreciated the damage I did to the trees with my arrows. I destroyed at least 20 trees during that hour and a half, and I still wasn't done. I activated meditation once again and concentrated as I then activated weapon creation as I began to create one of my favorite weapons from one of my favorite games, Skyrim. I imagined the design similar to a scimitar with a curved handle and a blade that swept backwards. I imagined the deep black color of the blade weapon with its red accents. And finally I imagined the sharper edges, the serrated blade and all the decorative etchings. And finally I projected it. When I felt the weight on my hand, I turned towards it and grinned in delight, as now I was holding an exact replica of the Daedric sword. After a few seconds of admiring my handiwork, I created another sword on me free hand and then used Observe on them. Projected Daedric sword, a weapon created by the gamer from his imagination. The Daedric sword is a one-handed sword created of the heart of a Daedra, which makes it perfect for obscure enchantments. It's believed that these blades are cursed due to the nature of their origin. Base damage 14. Durability for as long as its stats in contact with the user and it's being fed mana. With both blades in hand, weapon creation consumed less than 10 megapixels, so I once again activated reinforcement. After that I activated stealth, which now cost 13, and then I began to use high speed movement. I'll rename it Flash Step later, and charged towards the trees. During the next 2 hours I used my swords, slashing trees left and right like a madman, to increase sword mastery, and my legs to also kick the trees and level up hand-to-hand combat. I was at the same time grinding meditation, reinforcement, stealth and high-speed movement. By the time I was done I got 3 points in VIT and 2 points in STR and Dex due to the high physical activity I just performed. And if that wasn't enough, both meditation and reinforcement got another level, but only meditation got an improvement on its passive bonuses to VIT, Int and Whis. Stealth went up by 4 levels, putting it a level 5, and it improved very well. High speed moment, which I changed to Flash Step, also got 4 levels, and only its cost per step decreased by 1 along with getting a bit faster. Sword mastery and hand-to-hand combat both reached level 5 and their bonuses improved. My HP, HPRR, MP and MPRR ended up improving by proxy. Seeing that I still had an hour and that I Haven grinded Mana Blast and Rasengan, I activated meditation and spent the next half hour using Mana Blast with both hands and managed to put it at level 5, getting the by now expected improvement on the skill. Then I did the same with Rasengan and began to destroy trees with my most powerful technique. I exhausted my mana with 27 uses in less than 10 minutes and managed to put it barely on level 3. Panting hard, I saw I was rewarded with another point to VIT, but I dismissed the window and sat down at the center of the mayhem I caused. As I kept meditation going, I began to appreciate the view of roughly 100 square meters of total destruction. It took me 21 minutes to regenerate all my mana, which thanks to all the improvement now was at a staggering 2113 with RR of 50. That was all thanks to my int and my passive bonuses. Seeing that I had more or less 20 minutes to arrive to the house to get more reputation points, I stood up and raised my hand and activated ID, escape. I watched the damage I have done to the park disappear in broken shards of glass as I was transported back to the original dimension. I wiped off some sweat from my body with shirt before shoving my hands into my pocket, whistling a merry tune. Today was a good day, and I'm sure tomorrow will be even better. DXD. Gamer. Mom, I'm going to hang out with some friends again today. Or do you need me early here today? I asked her as I stood up from the table with my plate, but instead of taking only my dishes, I picked hers up and went to the counter to wash them. It was a blatant way of telling her I wanted to go hanging out with my friends, and if the amused look she gave me was anything to go by, then she caught on with my intentions. She shook her head at me lightly. Don't worry, eyes. I still have lots of errands to run and I will start going to the gym to improve my figure. Can't let the goods go to waste after all, she said, sagely closing her eyes and nodding her head. Of course, I agreed with her as I closed the window that alerted me of the creating of the skill, dishwashing, really. And finished off the cleaning of the plates, vases and utensils we had used before I dried my hands with a towel. Since you are going to the gym, should I buy food for myself? She shook her head. Don't bother. I'll buy it myself on my way home from the gym, since I'll be arriving roughly at the time we eat. It won't be daily, mind you, since I'll just be going 3 days a week. I nodded at her and picked up my bag from the floor. I'll be on my way then. See you tonight, Mom. Love you, I said and kissed her on the cheek before walking away. I was sure telling her that I loved her came out as easily as it did thanks to Gamer's Mind. I was thankful because it made my deceit easier. I stepped out of the house and after accepting the normal reputation gain quest of arriving at school early and coming back home early, I activated Observe and began to leisurely walk towards Kuo Academy, looking at anything and everything that was interesting and mundane. I needed to improve Observe as quickly as I could to gain the most information I could from just a glance, because that was my most powerful weapon after Gamer's Mind and Gamer's Body. It didn't level up. Didn't come even close by the time I arrived at Kuo, because I was sure that after level 5 skills will only level up fast in combat situations, and sadly I didn't have too much time with school and sleeping. Wait, did I even need to sleep? I mean, it was a fair question. My health was not monitored, for a lack of better words, by normal means. It was monitored by my HP, and Gamer's Body made it so any fatigue or physical pain I felt only lasted for a few seconds top before it being willed away. Gamer's Mind would also take care of any mental fatigue I developed for lack of sleeping. Slowly a monstrous grin grew in my face as began snickering to myself. Ah. The brokenness. Anyways, my evil moment of the day ended just before Kuo came to view, and it thankfully spared me of the strange looks I would surely get if I walked in randomly laughing like your every cliché evil villain. Anyways, after greeting Sona, who lacked the surprise at seeing me so early from the previous 2 days, with a nod that she returned as I felt my reputation with her and the school slowly increase, I walked towards my classroom and took a seat. There was a skill I didn't get to test yesterday and I was sure it will come in handy. I pulled out one random book from my bag and looked at it with Observe, which had been active all the time since I left home and it hadn't leveled up. Sighing in annoyance, I sent that to the back burner and stared at the mathematics book I pulled out. Making sure that no one was looking, I focused on the book. Knowledge absorption, I whispered, and I was glad it was a subtle technique. I felt my mana going from within my core towards the book, using the contact with my skin as a medium, and my eyes widened in surprise as I felt my mana copying what was written in the book and implanting it on my head. Most of the stuff I already knew or vaguely recalled it, but thanks to this I had the feeling I won't be having any problems recalling what I learned through the use of this technique. I was about to start salivating like a subnormal fool when I noticed Katase and Murayama entering the classroom. They noticed me looking at them and Katase smiled in greeting and Murayama smirked at me. Katase made a motion with her hand telling me she wanted to speak with me later, and I was sure it was about where we were going to hang out after school. I nodded at her and her smile widened a tad before she and her friend took their seats. I admired their beauty for a second before Aika entered the room. She gave me the sexy eye and I returned it with an amused look that had her giggling like a schoolgirl. I shrugged my shoulders as she took her seat and admired her supple curves, to grind observe of course, hee. A moment later I decided enough ogling and tore my eyes away from her and blatantly ignored the overbearing entrance of Motohama and Matsuda as I pulled out another book from bag. There was a hungry gleam on my eyes that had anyone caught I would have been suspected of being a psychopath. Knowledge absorption. I was so going to abuse the shit out of this. DXD. Gamer. After spending the first half an hour of the first period absorbing the knowledge on the books I will be using for the school year, I decided I could grind the skills that weren't flashy at any time and also didn't consume mana due to my regeneration rate of 50. Along with observe, I kept reinforcement and stealth activated, which amusingly enough allowed me to sneak up on unsuspecting people, scaring them. I also spent the whole morning annoying teachers with my now perfect knowledge of the school material. Knowledge absorption was a level 3 now. I hadn't been bothering myself with paying attention and all of them had taken notice of this and had called me out on it. When they asked me questions about the subject to embarrass me, they were in turn embarrassed by my perfect textbook's answers. If I kept this up for a week, they'll know not to bother me, which was what I wanted. The reputation gains for knowing the material and not showing off was also appreciated. Thanks to the constant use of stealth around people and managing to sneak up on them went up to level 10, making it my highest skill. The bonuses it got at that level had me salivating. Reinforcement only got 2 levels after 7 hours of constant use. I wanted to get it to level 10 for the increase in bonuses that apparently happened every 5 levels of skill. Observe likewise got 2 levels, and that was because I was even observing ants and plants. It now sat at level 7. Meaning 2 more levels until I could see attributes and feelings. When school ended, I stopped using my skills to get a break for a few minutes, not that I needed it, but it was an issue of commodity. I wasn't going to get consumed by this. I will be the one consuming this ability, and that best way to do that was being selfish. So if I wanted a break, I will get a break. I walked towards where, curiously enough, I had helped Katase and Murayama with the thugs, and they were both waiting for me. I waved at them. "Hello Mina-san. Miko-san," I said easily with a smile on my face. They smiled, well Katase smiled and Maruyama smirked as they gave me a short wave. I approached them and shoved my hands into my pockets, leaning on my right foot on a relaxed fashion. "Issei-san," said Katase in greeting as she nodded at me. "How are you today?" "Sorry we didn't get to speak earlier, but we couldn't find you during the break," she said a tad sheepishly, and she looked very cute like that. Murayama rose an eyebrow at me. "Yeah. It was like you weren't in the school on the first place," she commented. I rubbed the back of my head. Sorry about that. I was actually taking a nap during the break behind the sakura tree. I'm sure anyone would be hard-pressed to find me there," I said with a chuckle. It was true, I was behind the sakura tree, but they didn't need to know I had been meditating to grind skills faster. Katase waved off my apology. "Don't worry. We just wanted to tell you we were going to go to a sweets store not too far from here," she said, and she motioned with her head as she began to walk, Murayama doing the same. I fell into step beside them easily, and Katase rose an amused eyebrow at me. "Aren't you going to complain about sweets being too girly for you?" she said in a mocking voice teasingly. I shook my head with a shrug and smiled lazily. "Nah. Unlike most guys, I don't mind sweets even if I don't go out of my way to eat them. Except chocolate. Chocolate is awesome," I said sagely as I closed my eyes and sighed in bliss just thinking about chocolate. If you haven't figured out, I love chocolate. Murayama kept her smirk in place as Katase groaned. "Well, at least someone knows what the good stuff is," she said, and I grinned at her as I heard that, and I extended my hands towards her, closed into a fist. Her smirk widened and she fist pumped me. Girls like it when you slightly treat them as if they were boys occasionally, because in their mind you are seeing them as equals. "Not another one," I heard Katase mutter, and if the cheeky grin Murayama threw her way was anything to go by, then she also heard her. I smirked at Katase and she took notice of our amusement and she took out her cute pink tongue at us. Don't matter what you say, vanilla will always be better than chocolate. And that's final. I scoffed but kept my smirk. Yeah. Sure. Whatever helps you sleep at night, I told her and watched in amusement as she narrowed her eyes at me and huffed before crossing her arms under her bust and looking away, seemingly annoyed. Murayama snickered and she mouthed, "Nice," to me, and I nodded back at her just as amused. We lapsed then into a comfortable silence as the girls led me towards the sweets store. It only took about 5 minutes to arrive and it was slightly plain, but it looked inviting enough. We went inside and took a table by the window and we were immediately attended by a cute waitress. I ordered a chocolate milkshake with caramel. Miko ordered a vanilla ice cream with strawberry syrup on top and Mina ordered chocolate and Neapolitan ice cream. As we waited for our orders, Miko turned towards me with an interested look on her face. I didn't get the change to ask yesterday, but I was wondering where and when did you learn to fight like that? You don't look like a fighter at all. Murayama also looked interested and I nodded towards them. Like I said yesterday, it was a recent development. A few days after last year ended, I was mugged and I was quite angry at myself because I was helpless. I decided to learn martial arts and went to a dojo outside of Kuo, and the master took pity on me. He taught me the basics, which I picked on very fast, and then he had me fight the other students, which is the reason I learned so fast. I lied calmly to them, and thanks to Gamer's mind the lie was quite believable. Lie successful. Mina nodded her head. That makes sense. You fought like you had experience, but you didn't look like you were fighting for long. However, since you were taught only the basics, which I suppose are how to punch, kick, block, dodge and throw, and then you began to fight people more experienced than you, then is no wonder you can actually fight without looking the part, she deduced easily. I nodded at her in confirmation. Indeed, but I have been exercising recently, so it's my hope I will look like a fighter soon. I want thugs like those of yesterday to think twice before crossing me. I will not start fights, but I'm going to make sure I end them, I said with a smirk. Mina shared my smirk and nodded her head in approval while Miko shook her head, but there was an amused smile on her face. Savages, she muttered loud enough to be heard, and Mina swatted at her lightly while I shrugged my shoulders with an amused chuckle. It didn't take long after that for our orders to arrive, and it was an unspoken unanimous decision that our sweets were best enjoyed in silence. After we were done, we kept talking about ourselves, and I have to admit that the original story didn't make justice to Mina's and Miko's characters. They had too much potential and they were portrayed even lesser than a filler character. Well, I'm going to change that. The fact that they were both super hot only added to my motivation. And I could feel, thanks to my gamer ability and the reputation points, that they were taking the best kind of interest in me. I was not going to complain. We spent an hour in the store, and while I wanted to spend more time raising my RP, reputation points, with them I needed to go grinding my levels to get stronger as fast as I could to get stronger. If Rias was already observing Issei, and since I was Issei, then I had 2 weeks at the most to get as strong as I could before shit hit the fan. And with the gamer ability and with my knowledge of games and manga, anime, I know I'll get very, very strong. We walked out of the store and I turned towards the two girls with a smile on my face. Thanks for inviting me and for letting me pay. I hope that it'll be enough to repay anything perverted I have done to you in the past, and that it allowed you to see that I'm serious in changing my blatant ways. Mina nodded her head with a shrug of her shoulders while Miko smiled. You are certainly on your way to redeem yourself in our eyes, and if I'm honest, you're not far off. We can see that you are serious about changing the obvious part of your perverseness. We women find it flattering when men look at us, but we like it better when they do it like you have been doing today, than the way you used to did it in the past, she said with a cheeky smirk, and her face was slightly flushed. Mina smirked as I blushed slightly, and I chuckled nervously as I scratched the back of my head. Sorry. It's hard not to look when you have two beautiful girls in front of you. I'll try harder. I promise. Mina waved me off and shook her head as Miko giggled in amusement. We don't mind as long as you don't are blatantly obvious about it. Like Miko said, we find it very flattering, she said with a smirk on her face. I chuckled nervously and shrugged my shoulders. Well, if that's the case then. I was interrupted by feeling ill intent directed at us, and as the window popped out I turned towards the source to see a slightly bandaged Lieutenant Thug, the same one from yesterday, walking towards us with a nasty glare on his face. Walking next to him was a bald man that was taller and bigger than him and was probably nastier than his friend. He had some scars on his face and he was hefting an aluminum bat. Boss Thug. LVL 15. A despicable member of society that leads a gang of thugs committing minor crimes which include thievery, public harassment and the destruction of property. Nobody will really miss him if he were to suddenly disappear forever. He might be big and strong but he is very slow. HP. 1000 1/1000ths of a megapixel. 100 100ths. I idly noticed that there weren't people around again for what obviously was going to be a violent confrontation. I noticed the girls looking a light nervous and I saw that I was because they weren't carrying their shinai. It was understandable since they were trained in the use of it and not unhanded combat. Those are the ones I told you about, boss. Those two girls practice kendo and that guy knows martial arts. And they took our money too. Please avenge us, boss. He cried petulantly once they were a few feet away from us as he pointed, and I was surprised to see real, pitiful tears on his eyes. The thug boss looked at us and snorted. You idiots are weaklings if you were beat by this scrawny little shit. But you are my subordinates and it is my duty to take care of you, so I will avenge you. He then brandished his bat and a perverted smirk appeared on his face as he licked his lips, his eyes roaming the bodies of Miko and Mina. And we are done. We will have fun with those two beauties. You'll get dibs. Mina and Miko gulped as they moved close to each other and my eyebrow twitched in anger. While I wasn't against roleplaying a rape situation, what this guy wanted to do was stepping over boundaries I wasn't willing to cross. I moved protectively in front of Mina and Miko and I set my face into a blank expression. I'm afraid you'll have to get through me first, I said evenly, and I almost smirked when I saw the lieutenant gulp in fright. The girls looked at me with wide eyes and Miko opened his mouth to say something, but I turned towards them and smiled reassuringly with my eyes closed. Don't worry. As long as I am here nothing will ever happen to you, I said, and I turned around so I didn't see how they reacted to my words. The thug boss snorted and shrugged his wide, muscled shoulders. If you insist then I will oblige, fag. Quest alert. The cool protector yesterday's actions had consequences for today. The boss of the gang you humiliated yesterday seeks revenge for his subordinates and he won't stop at nothing until he hurts you bad and takes Miko Katase and Mina Murayama to do the unspeakable to them with the help of his gang. Defeat him soundly and protect the girls. Reward. 2000 XP. Greatly increased closeness with Mina Murayama and Miko Katase. A surprise. Failure. Severe injuries. Mina Murayama and Miko Katase will be raped and then killed. The quest appeared and I couldn't decline it, so I just waved it away as I activated reinforcement, doubling my strength and dexterity, and thanks to that both of those stats were above a normal human's now. The boss thug gave a battle cry before he charged at me with his bat raised high above his head, and I almost snorted at how slow he was, and seeing that made me feel comfortable. I already knew how this was going to end. Moving forward swiftly a few steps I met him head on and he swung his bat downwards to cave my head in, but I almost casually stepped to the side and there was a clang as the metal bat met the floor. I ignored it and I stepped on the bat as he began to bring it up, stopping him short, and I used the momentum of my step to jump and grab his shoulders with both of my hands to give me more leverage to hit him with a rising knee strike right in the nose. Cartilage broke and he yelled in pain as he dropped the bat, stepping backwards as he grabbed his broken nose. Critical hit. I ignored the wailing nose for a second to pick up the bat and I threw it towards the girls. Mina grabbed it and I smiled as she turned more confident as she now held a weapon that was close to what she had trained with, at least in general from. I heard the thug stop screaming and I turned towards him to see him glaring at me. There were tears on his eyes and the lower part of his face was covered in his blood, which was still gushing out. You fucker. I'm gonna murder you, he said in a funny voice that had I not had gamer's mind I knew it would have cracked me up. I almost sighed when he charged at me, again painfully slow. I noted that my hit had taken almost 20% of his HP and I shook my head. I ran towards him to meet him head on and he threw both hands forward to grab me. I had other plans, so moving slightly into his guard and to the side I redirected his arms, grabbed his wrist and forearm, twisted my body and used my hips and out-combined momentum to flip him easily, clearly, smoothly and beautifully, at least in my mind eye, over my head. There was a dull thud as he hit the floor back first and I saw that his breath was taken away from him by my maneuver and I noticed that his remaining HP was less than half. I decided to end this as quickly as I could, so I rose my feet and kicked him in the face as hard as I could. The back of his head hit the pavement harshly and I saw him go limp. I noticed that his HP was less than 15% and that he was unconscious. I let go of his arm and turned towards the lieutenant who was shaking in fear. Take him away and get lost. If I ever hear that you lot have been causing trouble, I'll hunt you down and get rid of you myself, I said as darkly as I could while still keeping my voice passive and my face blank. Portraying yourself as an emotionless machine was one of the best ways to intimidate someone by using fear. Quest complete. The lieutenant thug nodded his head shakily and despite the size difference managed to pick up his beaten boss with some difficulties before he bolted away as fast as he could. I kept the facade until he was out of sight, which coincidentally after that happened people began to walk across the street again. I decided not to give that too much thought, but I instead turned towards Mina and Miko and I was not surprised to see them looking at me in awe with blushing faces. I walked towards them and put my hands in my pockets and looked towards the retreating figure of the two thugs moving swiftly away from us. I hope that teaches them not to mess with Kuo Academy students, I commented almost cheerily as I let a smile appear on my face. I deactivated reinforcement but kept observe on. The break was over and it was time to keep grinding. Miko was apparently at a loss of words, but Mina got her wits together and she smirked, still looking at me with a red face. That was honestly one of the most badass things I have ever seen on my life. I don't know in Miko's case, but in my eyes you are more than redeemed, she said, her smirk turning almost sultry as her voice dropped a little. Miko recovered and while she was still blushing she was apparently thinking clearly now, for the most part. Yeah. Totally redeemed. Yes. She mumbled, refusing to meet my eyes, but she kept taking glances at me. I chuckled. That's nice. I then made a show of looking up at the sun and then put a slightly disappointed look. I'm sorry girls, but I need to go to the dojo. Master gets angry if I arrive late and the usual punishment is a fight with him, and he doesn't know how to hold back, I said in a scared voice and even managed to fake a shiver. Yep. I could be a wonderful actor. Lie successful. The two of them looked disappointed, but I smiled. He will, however, understand if I arrived late because I was using the skills he taught me to defend two beautiful girls, and then I decided to escort them home to make sure they arrived safely. They smiled at me, still blushing, and I returned the smile as we began to walk towards their houses. In the inside, however, my smirk of triumph would have made Sosuke Aizen proud. I said everything I wanted to say on the end of the first chapter. Expect an update before the 20th. Hope you enjoyed. Please feel free to review and point out any typo I missed and any inconsistency. Remember to check out the character sheets. I will refer to the main character as Issei since he is essentially him but not exactly. He also is me si hello anyone, but not exactly. Next chapter we will say Issei fighting against zombies, his date with Ake, which I promise will end in a very inexplicit fashion, and many more things you should find interesting. The Badass Writer. Previous ch2 of 10. Next, Chapter 3. This game is awesome. Disclaimer. I do not own the gamer manhwa, nor do I own High School DxD or any other non-original concept I put on this. They belong to their rightful owners and I am not making a profit of this fictional work. Enjoy. Chapter 3. This game is awesome. It was with a satisfied smirk on my face that stepped into a secluded alley after I had dropped Mina and Miko at their houses. Both girls had been very grateful and I got a kiss on each cheek, and they made me promise we would hang out more often from now on. It was obvious they both were attracted to me, and if I noticed it then they sure as hell noticed each other's attraction towards me and had not done a fuss about it. Which spelled good news, for now. Anyways, it was time for me to grind, and with smirk still in place I used ID. Create an ID. Escape 2 times each to level them up. I had already used them 2 times and each time I used them they went up by 25%, meaning that I only needed to use them 2 more times to level them up and get the zombie ID, the lowest ID that could be created. ID. Create has gone up by 1. ID. Escape has gone up by 1. That done, I looked up at the time and saw that it was already 5 in the afternoon. While I wasted some hours with Mina and Miko, in my eyes it had been worth it because I now had 2 girls that I was sure I was going to hook up with and another one that I was more than sure I was going to end up having sex with in 2 days' time. And if that was how I was going to waste time, then I was going to make sure to do it more often. Moving to more serious thoughts, I thought about the zombie ID. As I was now, I knew that I could fight both the normal zombies and Legion zombies and win, which if I managed to pull off was going to give me a lot of levels right of the get-go. But I needed to be smart about it, which was a given seeing that my int was high and my WIS was above the average for a human my age. I didn't really need to worry about the normal zombies since they were very slow, and thanks to my DP of iron skin they were no threat to me. The Legion zombie, however, I needed to tread more carefully with it because while slower due to its size it was incredibly strong for a basically first level boss. I decided that my best bet was to fight the normal zombies in close quarters and mix close quarters combat and long-range combat with the Legion zombie. I knew that I was stalling for time and I shook my head slightly. It was not time for me to have doubts. I needed to do this. I knew that logically I was more than ready to face the zombie ID, but I was also aware of the fact that plans rarely survive contact with the enemy, and that particular fact was bothering the hell out of me. Gamer's mind proved to be the necessary bitch. It was when I suddenly felt eerie calm and I raised my hand to the sky. Let's get this over with. ID create. Zombies, I muttered in annoyance, not delusional enough to think that I was way over this task but more annoyed at Gamer's mind. It practically made the decision for me. Bloodlust detected. I watched the world bleed into darker colors as the sky turned dark red and the sounds of the city that normally faded into the background disappeared as everything went eerily silent. Not a second later I began to hear the low groans and savage snarls of undead looking to feast on the living, and I sighed again as Gamer's mind shattered the primal fear those sounds evoked on me, and I went into autopilot. The first thing I did was to use reinforcement, and since that was activated along with observe I still had 20 MP I could use without losing it at a steady rate. I then created a Daedric sword on my right arm which left me with enough MP to use flash step without worrying. My left hand was free to use Monoblast in case any zombie got uncomfortably close. Since it cost 16 MP I was comfortable with using it at a moment's notice. Not wanting to waste any more time I walked out of the alleyway, and not a second later a zombie began to walk awkwardly towards me and I grimaced in disgust at its appearance. Its skin was a greenish gray, chunks of meat were missing on some places and one of its eyes was out of its socket. It was glaring at me with baleful red yes surrounded by sickly yellow sclera, and its rotten teeth were shown when it snarled at me. Gamer's mind overtook the fear and its appearance went to the back burner as I paid more attention to what Observe told me about the zombie. Zombie. LVL8. A walking corpse. No matter how it died. It hates the living, attacking and eating its flesh. It is very slow but it compensates with superhuman strength, durability and stamina. Individually they aren't a threat, but beware of hordes. HP. 800/800ths of a megapixel. 50/50. I nodded to myself at the information and quickly stepped towards it. It lunged at me with a snarl of hunger and I easily sidestepped it thanks to my reinforced dex and did a generic diagonally downward slash at its side, making meat and blood fly. It recoiled and shouted in pain as it twitched away from me, but I paid it no attention but focused more on its HP and how much damage I had caused to it with a normal slash attack. HP. 314/800ths. I blinked in shock at taking almost 60% of its HP with just one generic attack, and my mind quickly went through the calculations, and after a few seconds a grin so wide that it almost split my face in half appeared. It seems like at least with bladed weapons the total damage output depended on the base damage of the weapon and much STR and dex I had. The most like calculation that went there was the base damage of the weapon I was using plus the total amount of STR and the result of that multiplied by the total amount of dex. I can definitely work with that. I flash stepped towards it and rammed my weapon into its face, ignoring the critical hit massage that appeared right after I did so. I backed away and pulled my blade out of its head and I watched it twitch erratically as the zombie's HP steadily went down until it reached 0, and when that happened it stopped moving and fell forward, hitting the concrete of the street face first. A second later it disappeared in a cloud of purple smoke that smelled disgustingly like piss and shit. I noticed that it awarded me with almost 20% of XP. It left some loot and I was about to move towards it to see what I have gotten when I heard more groans and snarls, and I turned towards further forward on the street and I saw at least 20 zombies moving slowly but purposely towards me. They would be on me in less than a minute and I didn't want to be caught off guard, and had the zombies not been such blatant and slow opponents that would have happened due to my interest in the loot. It only took me a few seconds to recall a feature that would help me solve that problem, and I smirked at the incoming zombies. Enable auto loot. I said, and I watched as the loot from the first zombie I killed disappeared, and on the lower left corner of my HUD an icon in the form of a back with a red 6-pointed start appeared, wiggling occasionally. I would be best to leave that option enabled always so nobody asked why corpses would leave item after they were killed. The fact that they would disappear out of nowhere would be suspicious enough. My full attention on the incoming mob of zombies, I grinned and brandished my sword. With an application of flash step, I appeared before them, taking them off guard with my speed and a swing of my weapon. Later, the second zombie of the session was killed with an obviously critical hit. My foot lashed out in a roundhouse kick once I settled on the ground, and I sent a third zombie off the ground into two of its brethren, while my free hand unleashed a monoblast that sent 3 others away scrambling ridiculously. I saw that the zombies I had not killed had received significant damage, but not as much as a normal strike of my blade. I knew that I could kill them all in minutes if I used my long-range skills, but I had a grinding plan in which I would use purely short mid-range combat against these one and deal with the boss at long range. That way I'll be able to grind both set of skills safely and at the same pace, more or less. Grin turning positively savage, I stared at the suddenly not so sure of getting a easy meal group of zombies. Let's dance. DXD. Gamer, a new title has been obtained through a special action. Undead Hunter. Obtained by killing any 100 undead. You have a special talent and interest in extermination the undead. 60% increase in attack damage when attacking undead. 60% increase in defense when attacking undead. All stats plus 10 in attacking undead. Due to extreme physical activity and strain, VIT has gone up by 10. Due to extreme physical activity and strain, STR has gone up by 5. Due to extreme physical activity and strain, Dex has gone up by 5. Your level has increased by 1. 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 As the last zombie of the horde disappeared in a small explosion of disgusting smoke, I grinned as notification after notification appeared on my HUD. Killing off 100 zombies had been laughingly easy when I was both faster, stronger and more intelligent than them. It was just a matter of staying in the move and killing them fast enough that they didn't have time to react, and that strategy had worked perfectly. The first thing I noticed was the significant boost in strength after I gained those levels, and subsequently the passive boost to my HP and MP and everything related to them gave me. After that there was another boost of power due to the increase of my VIT, STR and Dex. With just that I was already stronger than what I had been when I first entered the ID. I absently equipped my new title, which made me take notice of the 35 points I had, which I was going to be using shortly. The next was how the skill I had been using constantly through the fight, Red Slaughter, leveled up exponentially a lot compared to the grind of the day before. Observe went up to level 13 and its cost dropped so much that I could maintain it running without fear of wasting mana that I could use on another technique. Now Observe will tell me the person's stats along with their feelings and possibly even a backstory. Detect Bloodlust also went up a lot thanks to the desire of the zombies of inflicting harm on me, and its range increased a lot. Reinforcement also got a lot of levels thanks to me using it constantly while I fought, and it now sat at level 15 with its bonus increasing along with the amount of MP it cost decreasing. Mana Blast also went over level 10 and the entirety of the skill improved nicely. Since weapon creation was an active skill with passive characteristics, it didn't improve, but I gained invaluable experience on using a sword along with putting sword mastery at level 15. I let some zombies bit me to level up physical endurance, and it now sat comfortably at level 10 because I let zombies bit me in really sensitive spots, which I won't go into details into explaining them because of reasons. Thanks to my iron skin, the bits felt as if the part they were biting was under the effects of pain-numbing narcotics, which meant that while I felt them bite into my flesh it didn't hurt. Because I kept using kicks when fight them, zombies hand-to-hand combat went up to level 15 and it was now giving my STR and Dex a nice bonus of 25% of the base stats, with stacked up to the power boost that I was already given by the natural rise of those stats through physical and non-stop combat. That was the extent of my improvement by just fighting 100 zombies, but I still wasn't satisfied. I could become stronger right now, and that was exactly what I did. As I heard the desperate and horrified groans of zombies beginning to congregate a few hundred feet in front of me on the middle of the street, I brought up the stats window and promptly dumped enough points in WIS to get it to 50. The skill, Mana Regeneration, has been granted by reaching 50 on WIS. The skill, Basic Elemental Knowledge, has been granted by reaching 50 on WIS. The skill, Mana Perception, has been granted by reaching 50 on WIS. Mana Regeneration. Passive. LVL Max. An ability given to those of special heritage that allows faster recovery of MP. Effect. 100% increased MP regeneration. Basic Elemental Knowledge. Passive. LVL 1, 0.0%. You have reached a deeper understanding of yourself and the world around you, and through that understanding you have learned to instinctually harness the elements of wind, fire, lightning, earth and water. Elemental skills cost is reduced to half. Elemental skills damage output rise 100%. Fire affinity has been granted. Lightning affinity has been granted. Wind affinity has been granted. Water affinity has been granted. Earth affinity has been granted. Mana Perception. Active. LVL 1, 0.0%. Every living being has mana, and through continuous experience you have learned to detect and understand the flow of mana of all living individuals into the environment around them. Range. 20 meters. Cost. 20 megapixels. The grin on my face was as wide as it was painful, and I couldn't help the maniacal laugh that escaped my lips as I saw and felt the effects of rising my WIS to 50 in one go. My MPRR was at a staggering 320.7, meaning that I was already at the point at which I could span most of my skills without worrying about going out of mana. I could say without a silver of doubt that I was extremely up, and it felt good. I also felt knowledge suddenly appearing inside my head about the 5 basic elements. I now knew how to turn my mana into the elements of wind, fire and lightning, and how to channel my mana into water and earth to weaponize them in my favor. I felt like I had known how to do this all my life, and I was just remembering the steps I needed to take in order to turn the latent power inside of me into harnessing the forces of nature. At the same I also became aware of the fact that living beings always let leak slivers of mana into the environment, and that I could use those slivers to track them down by using my own mana in a similar fashion as a sonar, but more permanent and not in intervals. It was like creating a dome of mana around the limit of my range, so everything related with mana was under the eye of my power. My maniacal laugh dwindling into the occasional chuckle, I waved away all the notifications and focused on the absolutely massive horde of groaning zombie that was slowly starting to unify into one being. The process was as fascinating as it was bizarre and disgusting, as the hundreds of zombies conglomerated and fused into a gigantic androgynous giant with now distinguishing features other than its sickly gray skin and blank eyes that shone with unholy fury. Legion Zombie. LVL 34. An assembly of zombies full of resentment. When a large amount of zombies feel threatened due to mass hunting, they merge into a legion zombie. It has no magical abilities, but it has immense strength, stamina, and doesn't feel pain. It is very slow, but should it find itself in a pinch, it will lash out against its enemies with unpredictable moves. HP. 15,200 15,200ths of a megapixel, 1200 STR, 233 VIT. 221 DEX, 5. Int. 0 WIS. 0 luck. 0 My eyes widened at how much STR and VIT the thing had, but seeing that its dex was ridiculously low and that its other stats literally non-existent, all my worries disappeared as I decided to kill this thing, which was going to be laughably easy thanks to my skills. I dismissed my Daedric sword since I was not going to be using it, and that motion was enough to garner the attention of the apparent boss of this level. It roared in fury and it began to walk towards me. It would be on me in seconds despite the distance and its slowness, and that was thanks to its sheer size. I estimated that the thing was at least 20 meters tall, dwarfing every building of the neighborhood we currently were at. Its giant strides covered enough ground to almost cover its painful lack of speed. Almost. This is going to be so fun, I muttered to myself eagerly as I made sure that both Reinforcement and Observe were activated, and then I activated Mana Perception and Stealth. I decided that for now those skills will stay always on, so I will never be caught off guard ever, and the increased bonus of 300% of getting a critical hit was too good to pass up. Suddenly I was aware of everything immediately around me and would take something that didn't have mana and was completely silent to bypass my perception. I then activated Mana Shield just because it never hurt to be overcautious, and that was another skill I could grind constantly because the shield was essentially invisible. I already proved that when I brought it up around a bunch of people and nobody noticed. It seemed like I was the only one that could see the transparent blue spherical construct around me, and that was only because I was then one creating it. And then I put 2 more layers of it, thickening the blue hue of the spherical construct, to grind it thrice as fast and to give me the same increase of protection just because. And I still had 145 megapixels to burn before my total amount of mana began to drop. By the time I was done preparing, the Legion zombie was upon me and the earth shook as it finally reached me. I looked up at it and I raised an eyebrow and it rose a leg to attempt a stomp, but when it began to bring its clumsy leg down I simply stepped backwards to put distance between us. The foot stroked the asphalt of the street with a tremor and upraised burnt alloys and dirt and dust. I braced myself easily, and seeing that it was confusing at not squashing anything, I began to prepare my retaliation attack. 4 spinning mana arrows swirled into existence on top of me and I smirked as I began to apply my elemental knowledge of fire to ignite the neutral mana and turn it into burning energy. There was a crack and a hiss signifying a chemical reaction, and my arrows became burning constructs of churning, shifting and constantly spinning bright red, orange and yellow fire that lightened everything around me and myself. A notification appeared in front of me as I finished putting power into my new technique. Through special action you have attempted and succeeded in improving upon an existing skill. The skill, Fire Twister, has been created. Fire Twister. Active. LVL1, 0.0%. A long-distance elemental attack made of fire that creates literal twisters made of burning hot flames that are controlled by the caster's will. This skill causes 400% of burning and exploding damage in contact with the target. Cost: 22 megapixels. Max number of twister: 4. The light of the fire illuminated my grin as with a wave of my hand the 4 constructs, for a lack of a better term, began to burn towards the still confused Legion zombie. Tongues of fire and still burning oxygen on their wake as they approached their target at even greater speeds than the technique they were based on. When the attack reached my enemy there was a loud grunt of surprise. It didn't feel pain as 4 explosions of fire and smoke obscure my vision of the Legion zombie. Critical hit. Critical hit. I nodded at the notifications and waved them away. 2 of the 4 twisters of fire had hit the Legion zombie on its head and neck, and the other 2 had hit on the chest and abdomen, and now the smoke was hiding the visible damage. I could, however, still see its dropping HP, and it was with glee that I observed the steadily dropping numbers until they settled after the total amount of damage I caused was accounted. HP. 13,714, 15,200. That was an impressive amount of damage, taking into notice that it was the first time I used the skill and it was at its lowest. With time I was sure that it would grow so strong that only one of them will be more than enough to one-shot a Legion zombie easily. But for now I was going to use this opportunity to more or less experiment and create more elemental skills. I technically had all the time in the world to make this course of action not stupid after all. With the black smoke and tongues of fire still covering the still form of the Legion zombie, I began to focus mana into my right hand. More and more power was drawn from my core and into the end of my upper limb, and I began to easily manipulate its form into that of a spear. I pushed mana until I began to feel a slight strain, but not enough that my pool of power began to deplete. Looking at the spear in my hand, I was vaguely reminded of Ulquiorra Cypher's Lanza del Relampago by its general structure, and I smirked as that gave me the final inspiration for my next technique. Using the new knowledge of the elements I was bestowed, I forced the molecules of my mana to generate kinetic energy, forcing them to collide against each other until, with a bright flash of light and the cry of 1,000 birds, I was holding a literal thunderbolt easily on my hand. A new skill has been created through a special act. The skill, Thunderspear, has been created. Thunderspear. Active. LVL1, 0.0%. The power of lightning has been granted to you, and now you can harness that chaotic power to do your binding. The spear of lightning created by your power can both be used as a close-range weapon and can be thrown at your enemies. This skill causes 1500% of piercing damage, 500% electrical damage, causes momentary paralysis. Cost: 100 megapixels. Maintenance cost: 150 megapixel per minute. Gamer's Mind was the reason I didn't start salivating at the absolute masterpiece I have created. This was the second skill I created that was many times better than Rasengan, which I was going to improve with elemental power, of course, but that will come later because I doubted I had enough power to safely use a technique on the caliber of Rasen motherfucking Shuriken yet. That was going to have to wait for some time. I heard a roar full of pain and hatred, and I turned my attention towards the Legion zombie as the spear of lighting I held in my hand let loose stray small arcs of lightning. 1,000 birds crying for blood as it brilliantly and arrogantly displayed the power I could wield now. There was a smirk on my face as I spotted the burned flesh on the places I had hit it with Fire Twister, and the disgusting smell reached my nostrils even through my shield. That was something I needed to keep in mind for possible encounters with enemies that used gas like poisons. The Legion zombie roared again and began to move even faster towards me, but it was still painfully slow due to its size. Not wanting to waste mana, I reared the arm holding the Thunder Spear back, and after carefully aiming I chucked it at it. The thousands of birds went up in a crescendo as the spear screamed through the air at incredible speeds, and the attack reached the Legion zombie, striking it in the upper part of the chest in its throat. Critical hit. It was a testament to its durability that instead of going right through, it merely embedded halfway in between where the neck met the chest. The Legion zombie tried to scream, but no sound came forth, only the chirping of the 1,000 birds as the spear dissipated, leaving thousands of volts of electricity running through the entire body of the first boss-level monster I ever faced in this world, causing a massive amount of damage. HP. 9,514, 15,200. As I was now, the Thunder Spear would cause roughly 3,000 points worth of damage, but I realized that I also had to take into account that electrical damage wasn't just immediate, but it kept doing damage as long as the excess electricity was kept in the body. Meaning that continuous damage would be done until the body got rid of the excess electricity, which was the reason why I did more than 4,000 points of damage. Electricity clacked between my fingers as I looked at the twitching Legion zombie with a smirk on my face. I fucking love this game. The perfectly circular hole with the blackened and cauterized insides and the branching lightning-like marks that could be seen on the aftermath of my attack were something to behold. It was beautiful. In a morbid kind of way, of course, but still beautiful. And I still wasn't done yet. Focusing on my mana, I extended it outwards without altering my shields and focused it on the air itself around me. I began to gather air and shaping the particles that made it up into two twin blades of air particles that began grind against the other, creating a high-pitched humming sound that reminded me of the Rasen Shuriken, but not as high-pitched and intense. In less than 10 seconds there was a visible distortion on the air itself in the shape of a crescent moon. A new skill has been created through a special act. The skill, Flying Swallow, has been created. Flying Swallow. Active. LVL1, 0.0%. The wind is everywhere and you have learned to direct the freedom-loving spirit of the air to do your bidding. An extremely sharp blade made of raging winds that can cut through almost everything. This skill causes 1200% of cutting damage. Causes, bleeding, status effect. If a body part is severed, damage adds up accordingly. Cost, 130 megapixels. I waited for the still paralyzed zombie titan to look at me shakily before I grinned at and flicked my hand on its direction. The blade of wind made a straight line towards its intended target, and in less than 2 seconds and in a spray of black, gelatinous, thick blood, the massive right arm of the Legion zombie was separated from its body at the shoulder neatly. The severed arm fell beside it on the destroyed street, the disgusting blood of the creature pooling beneath it as it twitched erratically. The Legion zombie for its part tried to scream in pain. I have already destroyed its windpipe, so there was no wind to pass through its vocal cords to create sound, so it resembled a person dry heaving as its remaining arm went to grab the stump that remained where its other arm had been. While this skills was seemingly less powerful than Thunder Spear, could see that behind the zombie boss there was a building with a deep carving into it, and I wasn't sure if it went beyond that. HP. 6,474, 15,200. Legion zombie is bleeding. If I did the math correctly, then I have caused exactly 20% damage to its total HP pool, meaning that the damage of a limb was directly proportional to the overall percent of the body part in relation to the body that was removed, not the damage of the skill used to do the skill, which I was sure would have done way less than what it did by severing the limb. What was so good about this skill, however, was the bleeding status, and I could see the Legion zombie's health dropping steadily by the seconds as droplets of whatever ran through its circulatory system fell to the pool done by the severed arm. Looking at the now massive pool of thick, jelly-like liquid that was the blood of the Legion zombie made me recall that almost everything liquid inside of a living being was made out of water, which was one of the elements I could now command. So I focused my mana, ignoring the frantic Legion zombie trying to move its not-existent arm, and had it latch in the still growing pool of blood and grinned when I felt a connection. Merging my mana with the water in the blood on the street, I began to direct it into a specific form, and I watched the pool of blood stop growing as crystal clear water began to rise from the center of the pool near the arm on the floor. The black substance began to dry as the water rose and rose until it was a shifting mass of clear liquid that churned this way and that, with only my will powered by my mana keeping it from like that. I rose my hand, which was turned into a fist, and the waters calmed down as I began to focus more on it, and I shaped it into a ball that began to rise up and slightly away from Legion Zombie that was now looking at the ball of water in confused pain. It only had time to open its mouth and try to reach towards the sphere of water before I opened my hand, grinning like the maniac I was sure I was. 5 thick tentacles rose from different parts of the sphere and lashed towards the alarmed Legion Zombie, the tips morphing into wicked pointed ends just before they reached their target. 3 tentacles pierced the upper body and 2 of them pierced its knees with a wet, meaty, disgusting sound. As the eyes of the Legion Zombie widened in pain, I twisted my wrist, slowly making a fist again, and the tentacles coiled around the monster, binding it in place. A new skill has been created through a special act. The skill, Water Convergence, has been created. Water Convergence. Active. LVL1. 0.0%. Water is fluid, and you have learned that one can only direct it, never truly control it. It flows and it follows the directions given, but water never obeys. Gathered into a compressed sphere, the water within it will follow instructions as long as mana is supplied. Cost: 60 megapixels. Maintenance: 100 megapixels. Looking at the steadily dropping HP bar of the enemy boss, I realized that this technique will be very useful indeed. I could mold the water gathered in the sphere into virtually anything as long as I kept supplying it mana, and I had fairly enough to make it a very dangerous skill. Also, depending how I used it, I could deal constant damage just like in this instance, but I will need to level it up first. With the new power at my disposal, it was not going to be too difficult. I began to slowly walk towards the Legion Zombie, bringing my hand down harshly, and with that motion the tentacles of water sent the undead titan to the ground with barely some effort, its injuries taking their toll on it. I noted that its HP was already below 3,000 and still dropping steadily. The beast was groaning in apparent pain, and while I didn't give a shit to what happened to it, I did give a shit to the rewards it will give me after killing it. So with that thought, I dismissed the water convergence technique, further soaking the undead titan, and focused on the last element, the one I haven't used until now. I focused on the soil beneath the Legion Zombie, and when I channeled what I felt was enough mana, I stomped the ground after pausing for a second before raising my hand harshly upwards. My hand pulled into a spear form. It was at that moment the Legion Zombie raised its head to look at me shakily, and its remaining arm twitched, but it was too late to do anything. It was all ready, but it just didn't know it, and it wanted to try and defy fate on its last moments. Sadly for the boss mob, it was not to be, as a spike rose from the ground at fast speeds and speared the undead titan through the head from lower jaw to the top of its head. A new skill has been created through a special act. The skill, Earth Spike, has been created. Earth Spike. Active. LVL1, 0.0%. Earth is strong and unyielding, but you have managed to tame it in order to call forth its strength to aid you in battle. This skill allows you to create spikes made of the soil you are standing on. Cost: 25 megapixels per spike. Critical hit. 15,200. Your level goes up by 1. 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 I sighed in pleasure at the growth of power and dismissed all my techniques as the Legion Zombie began to dissipate, and I scrunched up my nose at the absolutely horrid smell. I called upon my affinity with the wind and focused on pushing the odor and the smoke created by the decomposing boss away. A few seconds later, I dismissed the window telling me I had created the skill, Breeze, and opened my inventory to see what I had gained. I got a lot of money. Plain and simple. Before I had gone into the ID, I had $300. Now? I had a swooping $50,000 that I could use in whatever I wanted, but I was sure I will just leave there until I needed for something really needed. I had gotten 1 soul gem for each zombie I killed, meaning that I now had 100 of those, which I will leave there in case I needed them to enhance a skill or needed them to craft something really powerful. There were other unimportant stuff that the normal zombies had dropped, like teeth, ribs and meat, that I was sure I was never going to need, so I took those out and destroyed them. From the Legion Zombie I got health potions, mana potions, a skill book and a piece of equipment. The skill book I immediately used after seeing the skill, Life Drawn, which I always wondered why Ji-Han never bothered to use. The piece of equipment, however. Code of Deathly Midnight. Rank. Ethereal. While seemingly looking like an ordinary leather black cloak that looks plain awesome, this article is nothing but created with the essence of those that died. It gives the wearer an understanding of the undead, allowing the wearer to control the undead to a certain extent. The cloak also gives the wearer the ability to control the shadow element and improves stealth. Durability. Eternal. Allows the user to control the undead. Plus 50 to stealth skill. Plus 10 shadow affinity. I admit without shame that I almost got a hard-on when I saw the cloak and read about its properties. I say almost because at this point in my life I only got a hard-on from extremely beautiful and hot girls, so I reined myself in. The cloak eerily resembled that of Kirito's from Sao, only that this one seemed almost alive with the way it was shifting, but I realized that since it was ethereal and made from energies, then the rippling and shifting made sense. With some difficulty I put it back into my inventory since it was not going to use it right now. Tomorrow, certainly, when I came back to gain more levels, which was going to be insanely easier to do with the cloak now at my disposal. That done, I checked over my skills, and seeing that almost nothing had changed except for the additions of the new skill and the ones I had activated while fighting the Legion zombie leveling up a few times, I closed the window and went to open my status page. Error. 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 Display glitch detected. Scanning. Problem isolated. Solving. Problem fixed. HP and MP will now be displayed accordingly in relation to level advancement and modifiers increase. My eyes widened it and I couldn't hurry more to see what had changed, but as the window opened and my eyes went to the HP and MP bars, I relaxed as a monstrous grin appeared on my face. I don't know why I was so worried about for that moment. I hadn't felt a decrease or increase in power. But now the massive increase in power made so much sense. DXD. Gamer, I was almost skipping as I made my way home. Such was my happiness because of the 12 levels I had gotten and with them the new stats, abilities and overall power. While I was still aware of that fact that I was painfully weak in comparison with even the weakest devil, fallen angel and yokai, I was still growing by leaps and bounds, and with my newfound power I was just going to grow stronger faster since there were more things I could do at the same time. Eventually I arrived to the house and Hannah was already waiting for me with the food she bought already displayed on the table. I gave her a hug and a kiss on the cheek, making sure to feel her up without being obvious about it, but it looked like she didn't mind the prolonged hug if the way she smiled beautifully at me was anything to go by. I was sure that without Gamer's mind I would have felt terrible for manipulating her like this, but I wanted to fuck her and I will make sure to everything I could to achieve that goal. And besides, it wasn't like I was going to discard her as soon as I did. This world was perverted by nature. I was going to keep her and do whatever I wanted with her. How was your day at the gym? I asked her and she smiled at me. Pretty good, honey. Everyone there is very kind and helpful and the trainers seem to know their stuff because. She went on to explain me everything she did and I listened on, nodding and actually paying attention to her so I could make questions of what she was talking about to show her that I was interested in what she did. I wanted her to stop seeing me like her son and for her to start seeing me as the man I was. That was all part of my plot to bang her, and I was not going to be pulling any punches with her. She finished her tale at the same time the food was eaten, and when she stood up to start washing the dishes I shook my head. None of that, Ka-chan. I'm sure you are tired and sore from your first day at the gym and there is no way I will make you do the dishes knowing that. With that said, you are going to take a relaxing, hot bath and then go to sleep while I take care of everything else here, alright? It was worded like a suggestion, but it was none of that as I was basically telling her what to do. She looked at me with amusement before she shrugged her shoulders, doing wonderful things to her massive chest with that motion, before smiling at me in a very beautiful manner. She approached me and wrapped her arms around my head and pressed my head into the chest I had been discreetly looking at as she cooed. Thanks, honey. You are so considerate. If you keep this up I seriously will need to reward you in some fashion, she said as she rubbed my hair affectionately. I enjoyed her soft body against me before whispering into her chest loud enough for her to hear. That's not necessary, Ka-chan. With everything you have done for me, it'll be me who will be looking for ways to repay you through my whole life, and I doubt I ever will. I smirked when she shuddered in what I assumed was pleasure at the feeling of my voice and breathed on her chest before she suppressed her reaction and leaned back away from me with a smile on her face. She gave me a kiss on the forehead before she shook her head. Don't say that, eyes. You are my precious son and there is nothing I wouldn't do for you, she said lovingly. I returned her smile and did my best to return her tone of voice. The same goes for me, Ka-chan. She seemed very pleased with response before she hugged me and kissed me again, but this time on the cheek. I'll see you tomorrow, Aiz-kun. I'll hit the bed as soon as I am out of the shower, so good night, she said before she walked away, and I smirked openly as I watched her go, delighting my eyes with her wonderful ass covered in short gym. My methods of getting her to think differently of me were working splendidly. Because she didn't even notice it when she put that extra sway on her hips as she walked away from me. But I sure did, and I give her 2 weeks tops before she cracks. Ah, the joys of being a pervert with loose morals and a broken ability. Anyways, I stood up and picked up the plates and utensils that had been used during dinner and set them on the sink before I proceed to wash them. Today I'll find out if I needed to sleep or not. DXD, gamer. Turns out I didn't need to sleep at all. Gamer's mind and gamer's body dealt with any fatigue and exhaustion I could have felt due to lack of sleep, and that meant that I didn't have to waste time doing something as silly as sleeping when I didn't need it. With more than 10 hours before the time I needed to go to school, I dedicated myself to physical training, wanting to do the most exhausting actions I could do to test my theory. I created heavy weights using my earth affinity in the rich soil of my backyard and did all the exercises I could think of while also maintaining active the skills meditation, observe, iron skin, 6 layers of mana shield and mana perception. To get the most of the time I spent grinding, I also created 2 Daedric swords for sword mastery and used hand-to-hand combat to level those skills up at the same time I trained my body in the process. And the results spoke for themselves. When I was finished with my training, my base physical stats were almost on the 40s and the passive bonuses I had only served to take them higher than what they were supposed to be. Meditation went up by 5 levels, and as expected the bonuses of the skill went up. Observe was reaching level 20 due to being activated for so long, and I was actually doing it subconsciously at this point, so there was that. Iron Skin was kept activated for 11 hours straight, meaning that it was activated for 660 minutes, which equaled to 39,600 seconds, which meant DP 84,600. Yep. Iron Skin was a most OP skill, and I decided right there and there that it was going to be kept on at all times, because in this world with ridiculous strong beings there was no such thing as exaggeration and overkill. Mana's shield was already at level 33 due to all the layers I put on it, as the cost began to go down for each level until it didn't go down anymore when the cost of activating the skill was 5 megapixels and keeping it up was 10 megapixels. Right now there were 20 layers of mana shield around me, and that was not going to change anytime soon since the shield was invisible to everyone but me. Mana perception reached level 20, and that was another skill that was going to be up at all times. My range was 115 meters and I could feel everything that had mana that was at that distance. With my detect bloodlust skill there was nothing alive that wished me harm that could sneak up on me, and I was very satisfied with that fact. Sword mastery and hand-to-hand combat went up by 10 levels, and I think their growth was so fast due to the fact I had been using weights. The growth in powers was very much appreciated, and I didn't feel guilty about the fact that I was using the properties of gamer's body to quickly become physically stronger. My muscles healed instantly, and if I forced them to heal continuously using that skill, then to get stronger I just had to keep making my weights heavier as my stats increased. I was sure I just needed another training session like this one to reach 50 in the physical stats and gain 9 more skills that will only make me stronger. And now that I thought about it, I also activated reinforcement and meditation, the last one to level it up for the bonuses and for the accelerated HP and MP increase I could use for training. With reinforcement on STR and Dex were over 100, making me exponentially faster and stronger than the normal human, and thanks to gamer's mind and gamer's body I was aware of it and could control it perfectly, so there was no danger of a not knowing my own strength moment. I sighed, pleased with myself, and felt ready for everything that could come my way. That didn't mean I was as strong as I could be, far from it, but at the moment I felt satisfied with what I accomplished in a few days. As I was now, I felt I was ready to deal with everything until Riser, and I will only get stronger with time. That morning I prepared breakfast for me and Hannah, and I gained even more closeness with her, and I thoroughly enjoyed her lingering hugs and kisses in the forehead and cheek. She didn't realize it yet, but she was already changing her views on me, and it was just a matter of time before she was begging "Oh, choke on my Isseis or whatever, cock." After that I left her to do her business deals to get us more money than what we were already receiving thanks to her savvy mind and intellect. School was boring as usual except for the eye candy in the form of all the girls and female teachers, but I also took my time to observe Rias, Sona and their peerages, and I was surprised that I couldn't see Rias nor Sona's level yet, but I could see most of their peerages' levels, Kiba Yuto being the highest I could see at level 67. I was beginning to suspect that if the recipient of Observe was 50 levels above me, then I couldn't see nothing but very basic information on them, but I needed more proofs to be sure of this. The highlights of the days were when Mina and Miko greeted me with kisses on the cheek after they told the whole class how I helped them with the thugs, and I felt my reputation with everyone soar through the roof and I was now being looked at in a new light. Matsuda and Motohama were of course jealous and proud at the same time, but I couldn't care less. I was basking in the fact that I changed their views on the body I was inhabiting in a mere 3 days. I was in a too good of a mood. Another highlight came when school ended and Aika approached me with a gleam on her eyes and her body language telling me she wanted me to have my way with her. And I was going to oblige of course, so I smirked at her when she finally approached me. "So, did I impress you enough to get a date with you?" I asked her. She nodded her pretty head as she smirked sensually at me. "That goes without saying. What you need for Murayama and Katase." She trailed off as her face got red and she began to squirm in place. "I can't hold back any longer. So we are going to have a nice date tonight, and if you impress me and give me a good time I will give you something that you clearly want," she said huskily as she wrapped her arms around mine and pressed her generous chest into my arm. I grinned down at her. "You've got yourself a deal, my dear," I said as I began to lead her away from the school. "Bear in mind however that you brought this upon yourself and I will not be held responsible when you inevitably become addicted to me," I said with confidence and smiling suggestively down at her. Aika responded with a challenging, excited and lustful grin, and I knew that today I was going to get laid with a very hot girl that was probably into very kinky stuff. Contrary to what 99% of the world populations believes, girls don't like guys with money because they are materialistic. Quite the contrary actually, since they were the sex that focused mostly on feelings and the way you held yourself. Girls like guys with money because it showed they could indulge them in whatever they wanted, be it food or clothes. Once you figure them out, girls are not so hard to predict and decipher. It was still difficult, but with experience you can overcome the difficulty. And I was smart. I was observant and I had enough experience in dealing with girls, so impressing Aika was fairly easy. I didn't own a car nor did I have a license in this world, which I was going to correct as soon as I had the time, so we took the bus to Central Kuo and walked through the very urbanized city visiting shops and anything we fancied. Since I had a lot of money I could easily indulge Aika in whatever she wanted to eat, clothes that she thought were cute and jewelry she had been wanting for a while but didn't have the money to buy them herself. We then went and had dinner at one of the best restaurants in the city that didn't have a dress code, and finally we went to see a movie that Aika wanted to see. Through our date I held her hand and made sure to shower her with expression of affections ranging from hugs and pecks on the lips without being too overwhelming, but it was enough to get the point across that I found her attractive and that she meant something to me, and while that wasn't true at the moment it could and would become like that. But a little manipulation never hurt anyone and she genuinely enjoyed herself. Heck, during the movie she instigated a few of the make-out sessions we had. So I was fairly confident that I did a good job impressing her. Why, you ask? Well, harder. Fuck me harder, you magnificent bastard. We were now at the park, in the middle of the night, and I was pounding into her from behind as she supported herself on a tree behind some bushes. I had wanted to take her home and do something at least slightly romantic, but she had gotten impatient and demanded I take her right there, right now. And I wasn't anyone to deny a girl what she wanted, so we have been doing the nasty for several minutes right now. I was grinning like a loon as I fucked her tight pussy, which didn't have had a hymen, but I wasn't surprised given her nature as a pervert, but I paid no attention to that as let myself loose in the moment. I looked down at her and grabbed a handful of her rippling ass as the wet sounds of our fornication echoed through the forest. It was music to my ears, and I was sure it was music to hers as she moaned and screeched in pleasure. Harder, she shouted as she began to throw herself back into my thrusts, and I thanked my VIT score and gamer's mind that allowed me to keep going for as long as I wanted without feeling overwhelmed by the pleasure. I obliged her request, and with a smack to her shapely rear, rendering her slightly tanned skin red, I grabbed her by her hips and put more force into my movements. She screamed and shuddered as she clamped around me, but I kept going to prolong her orgasm for as long as I could as I held her easily while she experienced the highest peak of ecstasy. This was the third time I made her cum since we began, and that was all thanks to my knowledge on anatomy, previous experience in my old life and the big package that Issei's body had been blessed with. Aika had been very pleased when she saw it. Almost a minute later she stopped shuddering and I slowed down my thrusts so she could become coherent enough to look back at me with incredulous eyes full of lust and wonder. How? She couldn't complete her sentence and I couldn't hold back any longer with that flushed and sweat-covered face looking at me. It was so erotic and sexy that it was almost painful not to continue fucking her, so I went back to it. What are you? Yes. I had pulled out of her, turned her around and put her flush between the three and my body. Her legs automatically came around my waist and I shoved my dick inside of her and began to pound her pussy relentlessly, the position allowing me to hit spots inside her tunnel that had not been pleasured before in our previous position. Our lips met and I grabbed her ass cheeks as her arms wrapped around my neck so she could deepen the kiss. Our tongues wedged war against each other's and I steadily increased the tempo of my thrusts, and it wasn't before I felt Aika reaching the edge for the fourth time and I felt it was time for me to come for the first time with her. I ended the kiss with her and looked into her eyes, smirking at her whorish grin and almost crossed eyes. Where do you want my cum, Aika-chan? Tell me where do you want it and I'll give it to you. I declared huskily and latched onto her slender neck with my mouth still pounding into her with abandon. She panted and moaned as she answered my question. Inside. Paint my insides white with your cum. Fill my cunt with your seed. Mark me as yours. She declared as she began to move her hips in tandem with my thrusts, and her moans and pants became screams of pleasure as she tightened around me after my dick twitched inside of her at her words. I grinned at the absolute ahegao expression on her face. If that's what you want. I grunted and then hissed as I began to empty my balls inside of her while still moving my hips to prolong my own orgasm. Aika began to shudder and another scream left her body as her orgasm intensified due to my semen filling up her tunnel and then her womb to the brim. In other words, I gave her an epic cream pie. Quest completed. Quest updated. The Rise of the Harem King. You have successfully wooed the first of many women that will get to ride the roller coaster that is Issei Hyodo. Now you only need to expand the number of girls that you call your own so you can get the title of Harem King. But first you need to make sure that Aika Kiryu is 100% willing to go with the idea, so convince her by any means necessary so she can help you achieve your dreams. Rewards. XP to be determined. An indefinite amount of girls to have kinky sex with. I grinned at the quest and accepted it mentally before dismissing it in the same fashion. I turned towards Aika, who was still recovering from what I was sure the best experience of her life, and called for her attention. Aika-chan. She raised her head slowly, and while she was still panting and shuddering in the aftershocks of her powerful orgasm, she was still able to give me a very slutty smile. What is it, Aiz-sama? She purred my name and she squealed as my still hard dick twitched inside of her, and she looked at me with eyes so wide and full of lust that it was a wonder how she didn't come right there and there. I have a proposition for you. I began as I started to fuck her slowly, and she moaned in delight at the sensations it provoked on her. I had all of her attention now and I was not going to waste the opportunity. We both know that I am still a pervert, the only difference being that I no longer ogle and peep on girls, so I still want to be the king of harem. So, I trailed off as I began to piston in and out of her faster, and she gasped and then moaned louder, her excitement at what I was obviously proposing clear. Do you want to help me gather a massive harem of beauties? I assure you that if we are successful, our days will be filled with endless debauchery and pleasure. What do you say, Aika-chan? If you accept, you'll be the first girl in my harem and you'll manage it, meaning that you'll get to sample every. She gasped when the head of my cock poked the entrance of her cum-filled womb. Single, she sighed as I pulled out, only to scream in pleasure when I forcefully shoved my dick inside again. One of those girls, and even I don't know how many of them I will get. 10. 30. 50. Who the fuck knows? She was already sporting another ahegao expression, but I could feel that she was still coherent enough to hear what I had to say. So? Do you accept? DXD. Gamer, as if there was any chance she wouldn't accept. After she accepted my proposition, I took Aika to her house. She apparently lived alone with her older sister checking on her weekly and her parents paying for her apartment fees and all expenses, and I quite possible fucked her for 2 hours straight until she just couldn't continue and feel unconscious after the 30th orgasm. This world's logics were so fucking awesome. So after I left her covered in my semen and it also gushing out of all of her holes, I made my way back to my house. It was almost 11, but I had called Hannah to tell her that I will be arriving late since I was on a date with Ika, and if everything went well it was a possibility I will be arriving at this hour. So she didn't bat an eyelash when I merrily entered the house using my keys. It looked like she had been watching TV while she waited for me. "I take it your date went well," she commented in amusement, and I had to smirk when I caught the almost imperceptible annoyance in her voice. "Oh yeah. I'll be tapping that MILF soon enough, and there was nothing that could be do about it." I grinned at her. What gave it away? The spring of my step? My whistling? Or the massive grin on my face that yelled to the world, "I am the man"? I replied cheekily. Her amusement was honest now as she raised an eyebrow at me. "So, did you go all the way on your first date with her?" "A gentleman never does and tell." Her eye twitched. "So you did go all the way with her. I'm sure you didn't force yourself on her, because I raised you way better than that, even if you are trying to stop being a pervert, which is not going very well from what I can see." This time I deadpanned at her. "Ka-san, that girl is a pervert worse than what I ever was. If it didn't sound so ridiculous I would tell that she was the one who forced herself on me. Have some faith, geez." She nodded her head slowly. "Did you use protection?" "No, but Ika was clean and she told me she was on the pill." This, however, made me make a mental note on developing a skill that negated fecundation or something like that. I didn't want to stop fucking some of my future girls for a few months because of pregnancy, and I wasn't ready to be a father, not now, not ever. Of course I did. You raised me and you made sure to give me the talk. So yeah. I was responsible. She nodded again. "What are your plans for this girl?" I shrugged my shoulders, and at her narrowed eyes I elaborated calmly. "It's up to her, Ka-san. If she wants a committed relationship, then I am all for it. If she wants us to be friends with benefits too. While I do care about her because she is nice, beautiful and intelligent, it is not like I love her. While that may come to pass, I will not rush this even if we are having sex already. We do have a connection other than the obvious physical one, but we want to explore us a bit more before we come to a decision." She seemed placated and pleased with my answer, and I have to approve. I beamed at her and went over to kiss her on the cheek. "Of course. You are my number one girl, so any other one that wants to come into my life should be approved by you first. I always keep that in mind." She crossed her arms under her bust and nodded sharply. "Good to know you have your facts straight. Now go take a bath. While you had the decency of cleaning your teeth, you reek of sex. Don't make a habit of it." She warned me, but I could see that behind her annoyance there was real humor. "You've got it." I gave her a cheesy thumbs up and she rolled her eyes before she shooed me away. I could feel her eyes glued to my back until it disappeared up the stairs. So now she was sure I was responsible about sex. She knew I knew what I was doing and that I was willing to deal with the consequences of having sex with someone. It'll take a few more days for her to finally see me as an adult, but I can wait, and I already had someone to fuck whenever I wanted. So yeah. I could wait for as long it would take. After my mandatory shower, I found myself in my room laying on my bed with my eyes closed, and I wasn't sleeping. I was meditating at the same time, looking deep inside of me for something that I had been postponing ever since I got here. The reason why I didn't do this before was because I wanted to be strong before encountering the likes of him, and I knew that he respected strength, both of mind and body. Before anything else, it was not a bad idea to prepare myself. Not too long after I began, a window appeared in front of me. "A sentient being has been found within the gamer's body. Would you like enable communication?" "Yes." There was a pregnant and tense silence before a deep, gravelly voice was heard deep within my head, feeling almost like I was using headphones or something similar. "You are not what I was expecting, Ninjan." I grinned. "Hello, Diedrich. There is so much we have to talk about." "I don't have an excuse. It's just that I got caught up with a lot of things and my mind was left scrambling. I am back now, however, and better than ever." So in this chapter we saw Issei, Sword of Sioc, reaching level 17 by beating zombies and a titan zombie and being badass about it. He also got closer to fucking Hana Hyodo, and he actually fucked Ika Kiryu and managed to procure her help in harem matters. Just your regular day in the life of a gamer character in the world of DxD. Before anyone complains, I have been planning to use the shadow element long before I read Dragon of Dragons, Game of the Year Edition, by Silent Songbird, so I am not ripping it off him. You should go read his story if you haven't done so yet. It'll blow you away, especially chapter 9. I have to admit I was not expecting that. Expect the next chapter soon and it will be filled with epicness and lemons. The canon storyline will start either on chapter 4 or 5 depending on the word count of the chapters. The character sheet, which is more detailed, will be posted in half an hour to give you time to read a chapter without spoilers, even if they are not always bad. First, previous ch3 of 10. Next, chapter 4, Man and Dragon. Disclaimer. I do not own the gamer manhwa nor do I own High School DxD or any other non-original concept I put on this. They belong to their rightful owners and I am not making a profit of this fictional work. Chapter 4. Man and Dragon. Okay, let me get this straight. You are not really Issei Hyodo but a consciousness from another dimension entirely inhabiting his body with reality-modifying powers that lets you interact with it as if it was a game, basically giving you literally unlimited potential and a ridiculous growth rate even by normal standards. And if that isn't enough, you have seen future events of this dimension and you are planning to get powerful enough to deal with all of them as they come while at the same time attempting to gather the biggest harem with the most beautiful and sexy girls you encounter in the process. Did I get all that right? I nodded my head with a smirk. Yeah, that's basically the gist of it. Normally I wouldn't have revealed that much, but you were inside my head technically speaking, so you'd only need a glance to my memories and you'd find out, so I want to nip that problem in the bud right now before it becomes an issue that would undoubtedly get me killed. I see. And are you sure that Issei Hyodo would have been and I quote, admittedly very strong guy eventually but mentally a wimp that would freeze up at everything and would let everyone walk over him before he did something about it even if his ear was always in the right place? He doesn't sound like a bad guy, but if what you is true, and given the proof you've showed me I am very inclined to believe you, then I would have probably gone insane while dealing with him as my wielder and partner. I nodded again. That is right. While Issei became incredibly strong in the future, a lot of things happened that could have been avoided if he had been more proactive and trained more. I admit that my ability is utterly broken and that even if I only am strong enough to fight one-winged fallen angels and low-class reincarnated devils, you have to take into consideration that I am just a human and I have been in this world for less than a week. Imagine where I am going to be a year from now. Exciting, right? There was a significant pause before Diedrich responded. I would go with terrifying, really. But I have to admit that your potential has its appeal, seeing that you can become stronger than the current host of that prick Albion. This is an opportunity I cannot let go to waste, and you are already strong, so my pride will not be wounded by supporting you, and besides it haven't been 10 minutes and I am already involved in plots that could mean the end of existence. Might as well go with the flow and get used to all the insanity I feel coming before I end up depressed or something like that. My smirk turned into a grin at that. Excellent. Let's begin right now with what you can do to help me. Can you partially modify my body so specific parts resemble that of a dragon's? I know that dragons are resistant to magic while at the same time having a high affinity for it, a special raw magical energy and elemental magic, so I was thinking if it was possible to change some parts of my body to better harness that kind of magic. Oh great. I have a smart nut job as a host. The joy. I ignored the jab even if I felt amused at the groan in Diedrich's gravelly voice. And yes, I can do that. I was even willing to offer you that option since you'll be needing a lot of power to comfortably deal with what is going to happen if who you tell me is going to be involved is actually going to be involved. This is giving me a headache and I don't even have a body. Anyways, what were you thinking about? According to my visions, you were better at channeling raw magical energy and fire magic, so I was thinking about changing my skin for dragon scales to better use that, both to enhance physical combat and my own natural affinity to that element. It will also make me more durable. I would also like a dragon's sense of sight, smell and hearing because there is no such thing as over-awareness, and finally I'd like the lungs of a dragon because breathing fire and shooting energy blasts from my mouth is just cool. I would also allow me to use the cool intimidation tactic of letting smoke flow out of nose. I couldn't forget that. That's surprisingly sensible and well thought out. I have to tell you that I also dabbled in lightning magic to diversify my arsenal and wind magic to enhance my natural elemental magic, so if we go with what you requested then you will also be able to use those elements easier. Again, I am surprised. I would have figured that you'd ask for the dick of a dragon seeing that you were planning on gathering a harem. In the process of gathering my harem since I just got my first girl today. I corrected him. And can you really give me the dick of a dragon? I wasn't excited at the premise, but I was definitely intrigued. Yeah. We dragons have a mix between a turtle's dick and a kangaroo's dick. I never got complaints from any of my mates, so it could work for you. I'll pass. Oh, well. I literally felt him shrugging ethereal shoulders at that, and I almost sweat dropped. Back to the important topic. I have to tell you that the process is going to hurt like a bitch and then some. The benefits, however, are going to be very worthy. I did this with me previous wielders, and they only exchanged their arms and sometimes an eye or two, and they always got incredible boosts physical and magical wise. And you want to exchange your skin, 3 of your senses and your lungs. I don't even know how strong you'll get when that happens. A nod was his answer. I figured that, and it is precisely the reason why I am willing to go with this. If some pain in a controlled environment now is going to save from getting killed in the future, then I can go with it even if I am not very fond of pain. I never thanked Gamer's body enough for making any pain I felt non-permanent. That's a good reasoning that I can agree with. So, are you ready? I nodded my head. Yeah. But there's some other stuff we need to talk about first. For some reason I know I'm going to pass out, and I don't want to waste any more time than I have to. I want to spend every waking time getting stronger somehow, and seeing that I don't have to sleep because of how my mind and body works, then that means I will always be improving. And that's a habit I don't want to even risk losing. Very well. What is that other thing you want to talk about? Your manifestation of the sacred gear. What's wrong with it? I heard the indignation, a defensiveness in his voice, and it only served to amuse me a lot, but I just shrugged my shoulders. To tell you the truth, nothing. It's just a matter of personal preference and convenience. While the gauntlet is very awesome, is also very bulky and will mess up my speed-based fighting style. I was hoping that the appearance could be changed to suit my needs. Oh. I see. What did you have in mind? I know that you are a fan of cool-looking this as much as the next guy, so I was thinking about a pair of light-armored boots, gloves and vest. The jewel can go in the center of the vest, but I want to keep as much as an aerodynamic design as I can. You think that can be done? Can I put claws and talons? Of course. I could feel the draconian grin on Diedrag's face, and it also made me grin savagely. As cliché as this sounds, I believe this is the start of a very beautiful friendship, partner. Likewise, Diedrag, likewise. Now. Begin the changing process. I am as ready as I ever will be. And don't hold back on the pain either. I have a skill that reduces the damage I get, and it grows as I feel pain. This will most likely drain my DP and HP, but as long as it doesn't kill me, then I can deal with it. So whenever you are, go ahead and make me half dragon. Alright then. Don't hate me when you wake up if you pass out. I shook my head. Don't worry. I won't. How bad it could be anyways. I doubted that it'll be worse than what happened to my original body when I got killed, and I just jinxed it, didn't I? Here I go. I felt my skin melting as if I was inside a boiling pot, my eyes exploding while inside their sockets because someone shoved something into them from all directions. My lungs burning as if they were lacking air and were being filled with water instead, my eardrums rupturing as if there was a sudden and extreme change in atmospheric pressure, and finally my nose burned with the worst sense known and not known to mankind before it was ripped off. Before I passed out, I saw a notification appearing. Physical endurance has reached LVL max, congratulations. DXD. Gamer. My eyes snapped open when I became aware of myself, and I shot up to a sitting position on my bed. I glanced to the upper part of my HUD, just below the minimap where a digital clock had appeared after my first quest involving time, and I saw that it was just before 6 in the morning. That probably meant that whenever I slept, I will always sleep 6 hours, since that was what the body needed to recharge. While 8 hours was the amount recommended, 6 hours was the amount needed, and a normal human could function with just 4 hours, but since I wasn't a normal human by a long shot now, then that didn't concern me. What was of my concern, however, were the sheer amount of notifications that appeared before me. It was the biggest I had gotten in one go, and it began to get overwhelming until Gamer's mind calmed me down and I decided to look at them one by one. So that is how it works. Shush you. Dermis, epidermis and subcutaneous fat modified. You now possess the skin of a dragon. Ocular globe modified. You now possess the eyes of a dragon. Hearing canal modified. You now possess the ears of a dragon. Nasal structure modified. You now possess the nose of a dragon. Respiratory system modified. You now possess the lungs of a dragon. Acquisition of the skin, eyes, ears, nose and lungs of a dragon while still being mostly human has changed your race. You are now a human-dragon hybrid. Change of race into that of a human-dragon hybrid has granted the status humanoid dragon. Humanoid dragon, plus 30% hydrogen phosphide, plus 30% MP, plus 30 to all physical stats. Fire affinity goes up by 30 due to the nature and origin of your modifications. Lightning affinity goes up by 20 due to the nature and origin of your modifications. Wind affinity goes up by 20 due to the nature and origin of your modifications. A skill has been created through a special act. The skill, Dragonfire, has been created. A skill has been created through a special act. The skill, Dragon Lightning, has been created. A skill has been created through a special act. The skill, Dragon Wind, has been created. Dragonfire. Passive, active. LVL1, 0.0%. The mighty flames of the dragons of old are yours to command thanks to the high fire affinity you possess and the dragon-like properties of your body. This fire is magical in nature and burns hotter than most fires of both mundane and magical origin. This skill turns normal flames created by you into dragon flames and assimilates skills that use elemental fire. The skill grows using fire elemental skills in creating fire elemental skills. Increases damage of fire elemental skills by 100%. Decreases cost of fire elemental skills by 10%. Grants immunity to fire elemental attacks that use flames weaker than that of a dragon's. Assimilated skills. Fire Twister. Cost, 20 megapixels. Dragon Lightning. Passive, active. LVL1, 0.0%. The powerful lightning that was harnessed by the dragons of old is yours to do with as you please due to the lightning affinity you possess and the dragon-like properties of your body. This lightning is magical in nature and glows brighter and more powerful than lightning of a similar nature. This skill turns lightning into dragon lightning and assimilates skills that use elemental lightning. The skill grows using lightning elemental skills in creating lightning elemental skills. Increases damage of lightning elemental skills by 100%. Decreases cost of lightning elemental skill by 10%. Grants immunity to lightning elemental attacks that use lightning weaker than that of a dragon's. Assimilated skills. Thunder Spear. Cost, 90 megapixels. Maintenance cost, 145 megapixels. Dragon Wind. Passive, active. LVL1, 0.0%. The indomitable winds created by the might flaps of the dragons of old are yours to direct due your wind affinity and the dragon-like properties of your body. Wind generated by you will possess inherent draconian energy infused in it and will be more powerful than normal magical winds. This skill turns wind into dragon wind assimilates skills that use wind. The skill grows by using wind elemental skills and creating wind elemental skills. Increases damage of wind elemental skills by 100%. Decreases cost of wind elemental skills by 10%. Grants immunity to wind elemental attacks that use wind weaker that of a dragon's. Assimilated skills. Flying Swallow. Cost, 90 megapixels. Holy motherfucking shit. Do you seriously have a hard-on now? I get it that you are totally overpowered for your level right now, but come on, you can't just have a hard dick for something like this. Really, partner. That's just messed up. I ignored Diedrich and willed my totally natural response to my excitement to go down for the moment and began to relish in the massive boost of power I could feel. Bringing up my arms, I realized that my skin tone was noticeably different. While I previously had a very, very light tan, now I looked like someone who practiced sports every day during the harsh sun. Thankfully my skin still looked like skin and you could only notice the scales if you looked really, really, really close. I jumped off from my bed and walked towards the front of the mirror and smirked in success. Previously Issei's face had been barely above average, but now I was in the league of the likes of Yuto Kiba and Surzer Chs. Lucifer, and hat was thanks to the fact that my face was now narrow, with little to no baby fat, and my previously brown eyes turned a vibrant green with slightly slit pupils. Then I pulled off my shirt and smirked at the muscular body I now possessed. It reminded me a lot of Natsu's from Fairy Tail, and I realized how ironic that was since the status that gave me this body was called humanoid dragon, which was what dragon slayers basically were. That, and I was going to be recreating a lot of his and Laxus's spells along with creating my own for wind. This also reminded me that I will probably be changing my fighting style again, but I supposed that was normal since in games the same happened when you had a new character and it kept growing and acquiring skills that you substituted for others and such. My HP went through the roof along with my HPR, and it was because my status of humanoid dragon increased both my HP and my VIT, which affected my HP. And if that wasn't enough, physical endurance reached max level, effectively negating 80% of the damage done to me. That was reassuring. Even if most guys and girls here could still kill me taking all that, my max HP and my defense skills that were always on. Thankfully I was on the right path on correcting that. With this everything is going to be way easier. Thanks, Diedrich. I was planning on also becoming a devil because the bonuses to my stats and my bars will be worthy, and since I now have dragon skin and dragon eyes I will be very resistant to light magic, or at the very least I won't have the deep weakness normal devils have to that nature of magic. Meh. You're welcome. We can unlock the boosted gear now if you want. I shook my head. Not now. I need to go to school and deal with some stuff, but after that I'm going to grind some more. I think that the events I saw in my visions are going to be happening a lot sooner than I expected, so I have deal with as much as I can before everything goes to shit. Alright, then. I'm going to take a nap now. Wake me up when it's time. Sure. I waved him off and severed the mental connection and activated all the skills I had decided were always going to stay on no matter what except for meditation. That couldn't be activated while in combat, and I smiled in satisfaction at the powerful feeling of strength. Like I was now, I should be able to deal with the lower tier of supernatural beings without too much trouble, if I didn't underestimated them and played it smart, which was what I was going to do. I nodded my head and made a fist in resolution before I moved towards the door so I could go to the bathroom, and like in the typical harem anime tropes, that was when Hannah decided to open the door instead of calling for me. I saw her clouded with lust eyes drink in my new figure before she shook her head to get rid of that train of thoughts, and I cursed, not knowing how to explain my new appearance. It seemed, however, that there was no need for that. She grinned at me. I see that working out has been giving you results, Aiz-kun, she commented lightly, but could still see the no-so-light desire deep in her eyes, and her tone was just a tad deeper than the one she would normally use. I smiled at her and flexed my biceps, laughing mentally as she flinched, trying to contain her normal reaction to my actions. You can say that, yes. I've been on it for a while, but there's still some more time left before I reach my goal. She med at me before smiling toothily. Well, at least now I see how you managed to get a girl with your, in the process of repairing perverted reputation. I grinned. Is that jealousy I hear, Ka-chan? She snorted. You wish, Sochi. Now go get a shower and get ready while I make breakfast. You don't want to be late to school today. I nodded at her nonchalantly. Yeah. She gave me another look before she walked away, her hips swaying even more than last night, and I smirked. Forget about what I said last night. I'll be fucking Hannah by next week. I couldn't thank the creators of this world enough for making it so perverted and for letting me plot to do with it as I pleased. DXD. Gamer. Suck my cock like that, slut. I leaned my head back into the concrete wall as Aika began to suck my dick harder, thanks to the use of dirty language and demeaning words, which were actually a turn-on for her. She was kneeling in front of me with my dick inside of the wet and warm vacuum she called a mouth as she pleased me orally. We were at the roof of Kuo Academy during the break, and she basically dragged me here the moment the bell rung. My hand rested on her bobbing head as she used her knowledge to please my phallus and cockhead with her mouth, lips and tongue, while her hand cupped and massaged my balls. She had been more energetic than yesterday, and I think it was due to my new appearance. While my skin and face seemed to go over the conscious notice of everyone, even my mother, but my new musculature didn't. I think it was the typical game mechanics in which nobody questioned your appearance even if they noticed it on a subconscious level. If these were the results, I was not going to complain. Fuck yeah. Keep doing that. She swirled her tongue around the head of my cock as she suctioned the part at the same time somehow, and the feeling is almost overwhelming, but I could control myself thanks to Gamer's mind. Her left hand was twisting the skin on the base of my cock while her left hand still massaged my balls tenderly. This continued for almost a minute before she seemed to get tired of doing the same thing, and she released my cock with a wet pop. She looked up at me with big, lust-filled eyes as she smirked. Her left hand, which couldn't fully wrap around my cock much to my amusement and her delight, jacked me off slowly as her expression got more and more lustful. Is Master liking what this underserving slave whore is doing to his mighty cock? She asked throatily, and with my heightened sense of smell I detected an increase of horniness and flow of juices from her cunt. I grinned down at her and she mewled in pleasure as I massaged her scalp. Of course, pet. As a matter of fact, I believe you deserve a reward for once, I said, and she squealed in delight before she nuzzled my cock tenderly with her soft cheek before she kissed the head surprisingly in a chaste fashion as she rose to her feet. She continued to jack my dick off as she locked eyes with me, now standing up. Are you going to use my cunt as your cock sleeve, master? My answer was to reach behind her and grab her by her perky and fleshy ass and bring her up and towards me. She stopped handling my cock as her arms wrapped around my neck and her incredible legs wrapped around my waist. My dick found her incredibly wet slit and she moaned in pleasure as she began to grind herself on me. It was a good thing I was not wearing pants at the moment, since she would have get them wet, and while I could deal with that, the smell was another thing entirely. Even though it had not been modified, my cock did get bigger after what Diedrich did, and I was no sporting 10 inches long monster that was almost as thick as my wrist. It was so big that Ika could literally sit on my dick, which she was doing, as she rubbed her cunt on my length. Her arms tightened around my neck and she shoved her mouth into mine, and after our lips met, our tongues began to dance with each other's. A minute later, Ika separated our mouths and she looked down at me with clouded eyes and a flushed face as she panted. Her hips were working erratically, grinding her pussy on my cock, and while it was incredible pleasurable for her, I knew she wanted more. Please, Issei-sama. Wreck my cunt with your mighty cock and ruin me for anyone else. I gave her ass a squeeze and she groaned loudly as my finger sunk into the soft flesh of her derriere. Remember, slut, if you keep doing good and pleasing me, this will be your everyday reward, I told her before I pulled back my hips, supporting her entirely with my hands now, and I aligned the head of my cock with the entrance of her pussy before I grinned at her and I shoved 10 inches of hard man meat into her in one go. She shrieked like a banshee as her pussy walls clamped around me in her orgasm, but I covered her mouth with my own before the sound could travel very far. I didn't want to get discovered by a teacher after all. Ika's back arched and her big, uncovered tits pressed against my covered chest as she shuddered. She was already drooling and her eyes went cross-eyed, which filled me with pride. I shifted her position so now her thighs rested in my forearms, and before her high ended I began to move my hips, first slowly to just keep her coming in an orgasm of medium strength before slowly building up the speed and strength of my thrusts. Ika could only let out muffled short squeals and shrieks as she held onto me limply, as I basically used her to please myself while coincidentally giving her incredible pleasure at the same time. This continued for 10 minutes in which Ika never stopped having an orgasm. She was already hoarse and I deemed it safe to stop waging war with her tongue using my own, and I leaned back to see her expression. She was surprisingly still conscious, but she was close to going catatonic with pleasure overload. She had an ahegao expression on her flushed and sweaty face. In my eyes, this was art of the finest quality. Soon the pleasure became too much, and without prompting I emptied my load deep into Ika, recalling that she was protected so there wasn't any problem with me dumping my semen inside of her. Her orgasm intensified at this and her back arched even further as she shuddered in delight. Her walls constricted tightly around my dick, milking me exquisitely as I hissed in pleasure, shooting spurts of semen deep into her. Soon enough our state of euphoria began to fade, but I could tell Ika was still too weak on the knees, so I held her up, her legs and arms wrapped around me and my dick still inside of her. She panted harshly as she looked at me with almost fanatical devotion, and I chuckled. I can say without doubt that having sex at school is more thrilling than doing it at a park or at your house. She grinned saucily as she pressed her big chest further into my own and kissed me on the cheek. Of course it is, eyes. The kinkier the situation is, the more rewarding is the sex. For example, now we have the fear of getting caught in the throes of passion, and that just drives us further into feeling pleasure and excitement, she preached sagely as she began to recover her breath from our 10-minute-long session of fucking. I grinned down at her. Oh. Then how is your plan going? The one about getting a harem of beautiful women to have kinky sex with, I mean. It was actually my plan, but in the process of fucking utmost loyalty into her I made her believe it was her idea all along. You've gotta love psychological warfare. The walls of her pussy tightened around my dick and we both moaned. She grinned as her blush became redder. As good as it can go. Most girls have a sexual interest on you, obviously, but most of them aren't selfless enough to share, much less perverted enough for the things I'm planning on doing to and with them and you. Surprisingly, Murayama and Katase are the ones that are willing to share the sexual experience if it is as great as I say it is, which actually is greater than that, she grinned proudly at me. The plan was simple. It was public knowledge that Aika and I went on a date yesterday, and knowing our natures, even if I was changing, we were going to have sex regardless of anything. That fact alone made everyone curious, and curious people asked questions. Aika had the answer to those questions, since the norm double standards of society: women can say whatever they want about their relationships, sexual or otherwise, to whomever they want without trouble, while men become assholes if they do the same. As wrong as that was, it worked in my favor. I vehemently refused to say anything to Motohama and Matsuda when they had asked me about it in front of the class, and with that I became an even more decent guy in the eyes of the girls. Aika, however, had been bragging non-stop on how I fucked her into unconsciousness after 4 hours without stopping. And whether you want to admit it or not, everyone is a pervert. The only thing that differs is how open they are about it. The results? I was positive every girl in the school wanted at least one night with me. And while I normally wouldn't object, I didn't want to fuck a random girl that had no importance or relevance whatsoever just to satisfy their curiosity. I had plans for any girl fortunate enough to get my interest or had a relevance to the plot of DxD. And while my main reason for wanting an harem was for the constant orgies that it would ensue, it will also be a symbol of power and power itself. The plan was going excellently. Miko and Mina already talked to me, and they wanted to hang out again tomorrow. They had been blushing and looking at me with lust all the time, so I was sure that we were going to have sex after we hung out. This also served to confirm that I was wrong about the beginning of canon in relation to the start of the school year, which was never specified in the light novels, because it was general knowledge that things began to go to shit when good things start happening to the MC, which is me. Also, I could feel the eyes of Sona's and Ria's peerage looking at me discreetly and not so discreetly. The only ones not ogling me were Saji, Kiba, Rias, Sona, Tsubaki and Kaneko, and I think those 4 girls were just good at hiding it until they figured me out. Sometime next week Rainier is going to approach me and I will start fucking up the canon storyline, and I could really wait. There were so many things, and girls, I wanted to do that the thought had me so excited that I wanted to get back to fucking Aika again. I grinned down at her. Excellent, my dear. In no time at all we will be having daily orgies. I am already making good money, don't ask me how, but I will tell you when the time is right. And soon enough we will be moving out of our current living conditions so we can have sex as often as we want. I began to languidly thrust in and out of her, our combined fluids from earlier keeping us lubricated. Aika moaned throatily and shuddered in pleasure. She didn't say anything, but I could see the approval in her eyes before her lips smashed into me. After we made out for a minute straight, I pulled out of her, to her disappointment and confusion, before I set her on the floor and swirled her around until her upper body was pressed against the wall I had been previously reclining on. Her majestic, plump and fleshy ass was bare, and I spanked her hard, getting a squeal as her ass rippled and turned an angry red. From her pussy leaked both semen and vaginal lubrication juices due to the previous cream pie I gave her, but two paid no mind to that as I grabbed one of her pigtails with my right hand and her hip with my left hand. Not a moment later I shoved my dick deep inside of her, and soon enough Aika became once again a moaning and shuddering mess as she began to experience orgasm after orgasm as I fucked her. Break wasn't over for another 15 minutes, and I was going to make them count. Marital arts was not going to train itself after all. DxD. Gamer wearing Code of Deathly Midnight grants you Shadow Affinity. Wearing Code of Deathly Midnight enhances Shadow Affinity. Wearing Code of Deathly Midnight grants you the skill Shadow Manipulation. Wearing Code of Deathly Midnight grants you the ability to control undead class monsters with a lower level than yours. Wearing Code of Deathly Midnight increases level of stealth by 50. Shadow Manipulation. Passive, active. LVL1, 0.0%. There cannot be light without darkness, as there cannot be darkness without light, and yet, you thrive in the darkness produced by light itself. Shadows are everywhere, and they are yours to command and harness. This skills allows you to materialize and manipulate shadows as if they were physical constructs of the world. Set cost, 100 megapixels. More MP can be used to make techniques stronger. Shadows can merge with elemental skills to make them more powerful. Increases Shadow Affinity by 10. Increases efficiency in damage and defense of shadow techniques by 100%. Decreases cost of shadow techniques by 50%. Known techniques. Shadow Bind. I grinned in delight at the windows. I'm sorry Gasper, but I'm keeping this for myself. I'll help you with your sacred gear and your own ability to manipulate darkness and shadows after we meet each other. I muttered in excitement as I looked at myself over. The cloak fit snugly around my muscular chest, wrapping around my upper body snugly, and it was loose on the lower body. The hood was pulled down at the moment, but I knew that if I put it over my head it would cover my face entirely in darkness. I can see the appeal in wearing a piece of garment like that. It suits your image of perverted insane and astral plane traveling mastermind quite well. I grinned at the compliment. Thank you, Diedrich. Now, let's see just what I can do with shadows before activating the boosted gear. Very well. I slipped into the zombie ID, and not a minute later I began to hear the snarls, moans and shouts of flesh-seeking undead. This time I didn't even feel an ounce of fear, and I felt quite cheeky, so I decided to have some fun. My eyebrows went up a little seeing zombies wearing military clothes walking with little to no troubles towards me instead of dragging their feet around. I hit them with observe and was surprised at the new information. Nazi zombie, Walker, LVL 16. A soldier that in his life believed in the Nazi ideology, and as payment for his sins he now walks the earth seeking to feast upon the flesh of the living. Tougher than a normal zombie due to its soldier background, but still slow and without intelligence whatsoever. The head is its weak point. HP. 1300 1300ths of a megapixel. 100 100ths STR. 50 VIT. 50 dex. 15 int. 0. WIS. 0 LUK. 0 current emotions. None. But it's pretty hungry and you look like a fine meal. There was a bit more of information on the walker, but it was irrelevant. It seemed like every time I cleared an ID it will generate stronger enemies for me to beat. That was pretty useful, since I'm sure these zombies, which I now realized were an exact replica of Call of Duty, Black Ops zombies, will give me more XP. Now enough to get 12 levels again, but enough for another session of grinding and skill development, which suited my needs just fine. I grinned at the incoming horde, the glowing eyes of the zombies making for a rather intimidating sight. Alright. All of them are at a lower level than me, so. Oh. There it is. It feels like 30 unresponsive limbs. Let's get this over with. I took a deep breath and raised my hand towards the incoming zombies and locked eyes with them. Halt. It took a second. Both the zombies stopped walking, and now they stood there shuffling around and looking at me stupidly, bloody drool leaking out of their mouths as they continued to snarl and moan. I scratched my head before shrugging my shoulders. Kill yourselves. Absolute cannibalistic carnage ensued. The group of 30 zombies began to tear at each other's fleshes with abandon and no regard of anything else. They ripped each other's limbs and heads, took out chunks of decaying meat with powerful bites, and so on until just one remained. It was missing an ear, an arm and a leg, but it was munching on what looked like a kidney, snarling like a dog. I saw that the zombies were not fading away in black mist, and deduced that certain effect took place when things were killed directly by me. That was good to know for future instances. But now I needed to get rid of the gory mess. Let's see how strong your flames are, Diedrich. Be careful with them. You can get burned. I'll keep that in mind. I brought my palm up and created a Rasengan before igniting it with dragon fire. There was a spark before the spiraling raw energy became a tightly focused inferno of golden, orange, red and white that shifted beautifully as it rested just above the palm of my hand. I grinned at the warm feeling and the notice of creating the skill spiraling fireball, but with my MPR I could go further without issues. I began to pump mana into the raging ball of fire and focused it on expanding while keeping its shape. The ball of dragon fire began to grow and grow until it was the size of a 2-floor house, and I was holding it above my head. I had begun to drain some of my mana, so I stopped feeding power into it, since I wanted all my skills to be usable without wasting MP while at the same time keeping up all my buffs. I recommend you retreat as soon as you use that. I nodded in agreement before I hurled the fiery ball of death at the mangled forms of the zombies, and without waiting for prompt I began to use flash step to get away from the epicenter while still facing towards where my attack will hit. I was 200 meters away already when the ball of fire made contact with the street, and the resulting explosion still threatened to reach me, so I had to back off at least another 100 meters. The heat was bearable since it was more warmth than heat thanks to my high affinity with fire. The attack generated an explosion of fire that expanded outwards in a diameter of 600 meters in all directions, burning away everything on its path, including zombies. It took 10 seconds for everything to die down, and where once stood the defining parts of an urbanized segment of a city, there was just a barren territory devoid of anything except for burned concrete and ashes. It looked like the fallout of a nuclear attack, just without the radiation and exponentially smaller. My eyes widened at the incoming messages that notified me of the fact that I had just killed over 100 Nazi zombies, both walkers and runners, in that just attack. It was obvious that the skill had two effects. The initial explosion and then the burning AoE aspect of the skill. To sum it up, it was perfect. And very badass looking. Your level goes up by 1. 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 A new skill has been assimilated. What would you like to call it? IHM Med in thought for a few seconds before shrugging and grinning. I guess I'll just pay homage to the most powerful fire mage I have ever seen in manga and anime. Brilliant Flame of the Red Dragon. It was a good thing that I just needed to think about the techniques to use it. I turned inwards towards Diedrich with crossed arms. So what do you think? It was acceptable. I heard the grudging respect in his voice and chuckled. All right. If more power is what you want. I trailed off as I opened my profile and put 50 points into int, bringing the base stat to 100. Power is what you'll get. The skill, Mana Affinity, has become Awareness of Mana by reaching 100 on int. The skill, Medium Mana Capacity, has become High Mana Capacity by reaching 100 on int. The skill, Psychokinesis, has been granted by reaching 100 on int. The skill, Eidetic Memory, has been granted by reaching 100 on int. The skill, Perception, has been granted by reaching 100 on int. I began to laugh maniacally as incredible power and knowledge surged through me. This was perfect. If before I was prepared to deal with the first batch of enemies coming my way, then now I was ready to deal with a lot of things to come. Thankfully, I wasn't complacent and I had plans to become the strongest being in DXD, comparable to that of Great Red and Ophis. My goal was to surpass those two. The most terrifying fact is that with this ability of yours you can actually do that in relatively no time. I don't know whether to feel jealous of how strong you are going to be. Pity the fools that are on your shit list or giddy for the same reasons. Shit. Now you are affecting me. My grin was feral as I agreed with Diedrich's words. It was just a matter of time and encountering the right kind of enemies for me to grow strong enough to match those two entities. Thanks to my skills I was many times stronger than what my level suggested, so the best course of action was to create more skills. With the amount of mana I now had and the MPR that came with it, I was more than set to do that and more. So, Diedrich, what do you say about preparing the introductory speech for the Red Dragon Emperor? It will involve lots of fire, sparks and wind to enhance the fire. You in? Do you even have to ask, partner? Of course I'm in. Can we manifest boosted gear now? Sure. Gimme. There was an ethereal red glow surrounding my arms up to my elbows, my legs up to my knees and around my chest and stomach as I felt pure draconic energy surging from within me and taking physical form in the real world. Soon enough the process ended and I was covered in my ideal version of the boosted gear. The metallic red vest for some reason appeared over the midnight cloak, but it didn't look bad like that and the hood could still be put over my head. The vest was sleek and it had the emerald-colored jewel just where the middle of my chest, seemingly held by 6 claws that surged from the vest. My arms were covered up to my elbows in a sleek, scaled and wickedly clawed gauntlets that had golden and emerald details at the edges of some scales, and thankfully they weren't bulky at all, meaning that I barely felt their weights. I made 2 fists and the sound of 2 metal sticks hitting each other multiple times was heard. I looked down at my feet and my legs were covered up to the knee in boots that resembled greatly the gauntlets. Just like Diedrich said he would, he gave me 4 front-clawed fingers and 2 wicked talons. I was sure it was going to take a while to get used to them, but I know I'll manage. A skill has been created through a special act. The skill, Boosted Gear, has been created. Boosted Gear. Active. LVL1, 0.0%. Also known as the Red Dragon Emperor's Gauntlet, is a sacred gear listed as one of the 13 Longinus. It has the spirit of the Welsh dragon, Diedrich, residing within it. The boosted gear has the ability to boost, which doubles the user's physical and magical power every 10 seconds. Maintenance, 100 megapixels. Inducements. Boost. Doubles the user's HP, MP, STR and Dex. This call is announced every 10 seconds until the user reaches her physical limit. Explosion. Releases the boosted gear's stored power in a beam of raw magical power from the jewel of the Welsh dragon. Reset. This announcement is called after all the boosted gear's stored power during explosion is drained. Once called, the user cannot use boost again until he releases another explosion, so long as his body is not near its physical limits. Burst. This announcement is called when the boosted gear's wielder reaches her physical limit. Once called, all of the user's increased powers are drained. Transfer. Transfers increased power to other people or objects. I was slightly disappointed, but no overly so since I had more sense than that, for not getting Balance Breaker and Juggernaut Drive right off the bat. For some reason I think that I'll need to reach level 50 on the boosted gear skill to get Balance Breaker and then max it to get Juggernaut Drive. That was going to take a while, but if I used boosted gear constantly while training I could get Balance Breaker by the time of the Young Devil's Gathering, just like Issei did in the light novels. I will try my best to get it before Kokebiel shows his war-obsessed ass, but that wasn't something I could be sure of. I shook my head and smacked one armed and clawed fist into another, a meddling clang resounding through the empty streets of Kuo that were soon going to be destroyed. Let's go wild, Diedrich. The following encouraging and approving roar from the Red Dragon Emperor was something I wanted to be capable of doing in the future. DXD. Gamer Dragonfire. Assimilated Skills. Fire Twister. 18 megapixels. Spiraling Fireball. 100 megapixels. Brilliant Flame of the Red Dragon. 400 megapixels. Red Dragon's Roar. 300 megapixels. Iron Fist of the Red Dragon. 50 megapixels. Flaming Claw of the Red Dragon. 50 megapixels. Scorching Wings of the Red Dragon. 100 megapixels. Crimson Lotus. 800 megapixels. Fire Annihilation. 700 megapixels. Dragonic Fire Aura. 250 megapixels. Dragon Lighting. Assimilated Skills. Lightning Spear. 80 megapixels. Lightning Bolt. 50 megapixels. Lightning Blade. 100 megapixels. Pale Lightning. 20 megapixels. Red Dragon's Lightning Roar. 350 megapixels. Dragonic Lightning Aura. 300 megapixels. Shadow Manipulation. Known techniques. Shadow Bind. Shadow Murder. Shadow Travel. Your level goes up by 1. Your level goes up by 1. Your level goes up by 1. A new title has been obtained through a special action. Bane of the Undead. Obtained by killing any 500 undead. You have a special talent and interest in Extermination the Undead. 150% increase in attack damage when attacking undead. 150% increase in defense when attacking undead. All stats plus 30 in attacking undead. It took me murdering 400 plus Nazi zombies along with 2 Legion Nazi zombies to get 3 more levels and develop the skills I wanted at the moment. It took me almost all night, but I managed to do so, and in the process I increased the level of everything except meditation since it couldn't be used in combat. My base physical stats went over 45 since I was constantly moving around using shadow travel and flash step without stopping. Massive general improvement was not the only thing I got from the killing spree I just participated in. I had many soul gems now ready to be used when I got my hands on a healing skill, and also I was now the proud owner of more than $250,000. Never thought I would say this, but thank you Nazi zombies for the monetary contribution and aid. I promise I'll use it for good things, for me. I now stood in the middle of a burned and blackened wasteland. I had destroyed Kuo almost completely except for the really gigantic buildings. Everywhere I turned it was just smoke and ashes. This was what I needed to realize that I was more than ready for anything. If I could destroy 80% of a city as big as Kuo in just one night, then it meant that I could protect it from anyone stupid enough to attack it. How do you think I compare to devils right now, Diedrich? I would say that without the boosted gear you are on the top tier of low-class devils. Should you use boosted gear until your current limit, you can easily match a high-class devil. And if you are smart about how you fight, then you can beat an ultimate class devil before they decided to stop playing with you or eradicate you from existence. I nodded my head as the boosted gear dispersed in particles of red light. I thought as much. I unequipped the cloak of Deathly Midnight, leaving me wearing my black jeans and white t-shirt, and one eyebrow went up when I still feel the connection to the shadows around me. It was very weak, but it was still there. That's interesting. And useful should I for some reason cannot equip the cloak and am in need of use shadows. Indeed. Also that psychokinesis skill of yours is very useful. You can make hands out of mind power and with them use skill that require your hands as focus. With the boosted gear full power you can create an overwhelming barrage of attacks while you engage your opponents in close range at the same time. I grinned. Telekinesis, or psychokinesis, whatever you wanted to call it, was the most versatile skill ever. I could do anything with it. Literally anything. It was a skill I will try my best to max it because very 5 levels the amount of force per megapixel I could generate increased by 1. It was 1 megapixel, 1 pound of force at level 1, but when it reached level 5 it became 1 megapixel, 2 pounds of force. If I maxed it will probably become 100 pounds of force per megapixel, and that was Franklin Richards' level of insane. I sighed as I used my eidetic memory to walk towards a location where I knew an alley had been before I burned everything. I should go home before Hannah realizes I am not inside the house. Even if she thinks I'm working out, I'm normally home by this time. I have school today, and after that I have that date with Miko and Mina, which I know is going to end in kinky sex. After that I'll continue to grind my skills. I should also grind ID. Create so I can fight stronger monsters when I am in need of a leveling spree. That's a sensible plan. If that's all for now, I'll take a mental nap. Wake me up if anything interesting related to battle or you making a fool of yourself happens. Otherwise don't. Lazy overgrown lizard. You are just jealous I'm cooler than you. Give me a few more months and we'll see who is cooler. You are on, puny human. DXD, gamer, Issei Hyodo. Can we speak for a moment? The background chatter of teenage students ceased abruptly as I hear the request. It was the end of class and I was on my way to meet Miko and Mina for our date after a boring day of grinding non-flashy but extremely useful skills when Sona Citri approached me out of the blue. She was looking as hot as ever, but there was something in her gaze that told me that whatever she wanted to speak with me was serious matter. I nodded at her after a second. Of course. Lead the way. She inclined her head and turned away and began walking. I ignored the jealous looks of everyone as I followed her. It was obvious what she wanted to talk me about, and I was more surprised she hadn't approached me sooner. While I was trying to keep my activities secret from normal humans, it was almost impossible to do so from supernatural beings like devils. While a little worried since I could see her level, which means she was at least 50 levels above me, I was confident she wasn't going to harm me. I haven't detected any bloodlust from her, and her emotions were more around intrigued and slightly aroused, which made me smirk. It seemed like I was right above her. She was interested in me, more now due to my exponential increases in power, but she was over being blatantly obvious about it. And if observe wasn't enough to tell me that, then the subtle sway of her hips was enough to tell me that she wanted me to look, and look I did. A few minutes later we reached our destination, and I wasn't surprised to see that it was the student council room. She opened the door and slipped inside and followed her without hesitation. I rose an eyebrow when the vice president and Sona's queen, Tsubaki, closed the door behind me before there was a noticeable shimmer of energy. You have entered a soundproofing and energy cloaking barrier. Overkill much? There was an amused giggle that didn't come from Sona nor Tsubaki, and turned my head lazily towards the alluring forms of Rias Gremory and Akeno Hamejima, the redhead sitting on a leather couch and the dark-haired seductress standing behind her with arms folded in front her, the biggest breast I have ever seen being subtly pushed forwards. The two of them smiled amusedly at me, and I knew they were the source of the giggles. Sona cleared her throat and I turned towards her with a raised eyebrow. She motioned towards the where Rias and Akeno were, specifically a chair in front of the couch. Please take a seat, Issei-san. We don't wish to harm you, merely speak and come clean with you, she explained. I shrugged my shoulders and nodded and made my way towards Rias and Akeno and smiled boyishly at them. Good evening to both of you. How is it going? I asked nonchalantly as I let my bag rest against the foot of the chair after I got comfortable on it. Ria's smile widened, and what a beautiful smile it was, as she looked at me. Hello to you too, Issei-san. I'm doing fairly well, thanks for asking. I would ask the same, but I know for a fact that you have been having a really good time in the past week, she said with amusement before she giggled sultrily. Another beautiful thing about her. Akeno gave me a saucy smile and looked at me with eyes just as lustful as Aika's. Well, at least I know I'll be tapping the girl with the hottest body in DXD, Even if she was into really kinky stuff that normally would have made me pause, but this was Akeno, so small sacrifices would be made. Oh yes. Kiryu-san has been quite descriptive with what you have done to her. I wonder, Fufufu. Rias looked back at her queen. Akeno. Settle down. She admonished gently, but I could see, and read it from the window created by Observe, that she was wondering and wanting the same thing Akeno did. All right. Another hot girl for future sexy endeavors. I'm in. Akeno inclined her head elegantly. I apologize, Keicho. She then turned towards me, now looking regal but still seductive. Would you like some tea, Issei-san? I nodded at her. She supposedly brewed the best tea in the world, and I have to see for myself if that is true. Of course, Akeno-san. That'd be lovely. Akeno nodded and walked away to brew the tea, and she was followed by Tsubaki. The both of them subtly swaying their hips for, I hoped, my viewing pleasure. Tsubaki was also interested in me, but not to the extent of Rias and Akeno, but more than Sona. Sona took a seat next to Rias and she crossed one leg over the other, and while I caught the movement and a flash of black lace, my eyes never moved away from hers. I was rewarded with an approving smile as she subtly relaxed. Another test of character. Good thing I had more common sense than Issei then. I'm not going to beat around the bush and will be direct with you, Issei-san. Are you aware of the supernatural world? Asked Sona directly, crossing her lithe arms under her perky boost. Her eyes became slit with demonic power as she began to subtly express her presence on the room. Her message was clear. This is a serious matter, so don't fuck around with me. I wasn't about to do so. I shrugged my shoulders. I cannot say I know about it, because what I know is that during the break I woke up with the ability to use this energy called mana. Also, I have been growing in power almost every day in the past week. Rias looked at me in deep interest now. It is obvious you have a sacred gear, which are items with powerful abilities bestowed upon humans by the original god from the Bible, and that you awakened it when you began to grow in power so fast. Sona nodded in agreement. That much is obvious, she admitted before she leveled a hard stare on me. The question is, what kind of sacred gear makes you grow 20 times stronger, at least magically speaking, in less than 7 days? I smirked at her. I don't know if it has to do anything with it, but my sacred gear, as you so call it, was given to me by a red western dragon that called himself the Welsh Dragon and Red Dragon Emperor, Diedrich. I activated boosted gear and chuckled when their eyes widened to the size of dinner plates, and I caught a similar expression from Akeno and Tsubaki as they looked at my armored vest, wicked gauntlets and boots with talons. He called it boosted gear. He has also been teaching me a lot of stuff. Something about not wanting a weak wielder or something like that. Boosted gear, Rias muttered, and she was now looking at me with open lust and hope. I knew for a fact that devils were beings driven by desire and were attracted to power. I possessed the boosted gear, a sacred gear that had only myself as the limit to how powerful I could be, and Rias saw in me a way to get what she desires, which is not to marry Riser Phoenix. She knew she needed to power for that, and I suddenly became her best bet. One of the 13 Longinus, Sona's look was more lust and avarice than anything else. One of her ambitions was to be recognized as an accomplished high-class devil with a powerful peerage to get out her sister's shadow. And like Rias, I became one of the possible opportunities to be exactly that. I knew that Sona had at the moment 1 rook piece, 1 bishop piece and 3 pawns. I grinned in glee. By your reactions, then that must mean that this is one powerful sacred gear, right? I asked in wonder as I began to make the show of inspecting the boosted gear in a new light. I already knew that this sacred gear had the potential to be the most powerful out of them all just because the gear itself didn't have a limit. While true Longinus is a one-shot kill cheat, the damned thing has to hit you first, which made it the perfect weapon for a glass cannon fighter. The problem is that Cao Cao is not a glass cannon fighter, and the fucker is very, very skilled. And we'll have to fight him and kill him. The joy. Rias calmed down after a few seconds when I dismissed boosted gear, and there was barely concealed greed in green eyes. It is one of the most powerful sacred gears. As a matter of fact, it is on the top tier of the 13 Longinus. Sacred gears that are believed to be strong enough to kill gods. Sano followed after her. Indeed. And because it is so powerful, you have gathered some unwanted attention, she said with some hesitance in her voice, and that was enough for me to see through them. They wanted to offer their protection in exchange of the power of my boosted gear. Well, not the boosted gear per se, because they just found out about it, but they probably wanted the power of someone who grew 20 times in strength in just a week. I rose an eyebrow at her skeptically. Unwanted attention? Rias nodded in agreement. Yes. You see, we are not humans, Issei-san. We are devils. Cue epic unfolding of black wings from every devil in the room, meaning, everyone else but me. And Kuo is our territory in the human world. But since we are at a tentative peace with the angel faction and the fallen angels faction, we must let them come and go under supervision to keep the peace. Recently you have been followed by a fallen angel that we don't know what she wants to do with you, but I doubt is something you'd like. Med in thought. I haven't detected Rainier or anyone, so she probably observed me from further away of the limits of my perception range. They, however, didn't need to know that. So that was the reason I've been feeling like I am being followed everywhere. Both Rias and Sona twitched and I smirked. I take it that you two also had people follow me around, right? I didn't know that, but I think it was sensible to believe that likewise. Sona fixed her glasses. Yes. We have. I'm not going to say something cliché like it was for our safety, but that wouldn't be a lie either. We also were curious about your sudden growth, but other than the fact that you were capable of concealing your presence completely for hours, and now that you have the boosted gear, we don't know much about you. I suppose it would be the same for the fallen angel that has been following you around. When Sona finished, Akeno approached us with very nice smelling tea, and she and Tsubaki passed us our cups. I took a whiff of the heavenly aroma, made better by my overdeveloped senses, before taking a sip. My taste buds exploded pleasantly at the extremely good flavor, and I calmly set the tea down before looking at the expectant Akeno. Without a doubt the best tea I've ever had. I'm willing to do anything to have it every day, I said seriously. Akeno smiled sultrily and my loins stirred. That can be arranged, Issei-san. Rias coughed to gain my attention and I turned towards her, absently noting Tsubaki standing behind Sona now. We know that you aren't a fool, Issei-san, so we want to offer you protection from the fallen angels in case something happens. You live in my territory, you are aware of the supernatural, and you have a sacred gear, one of the 13 Longinus notwithstanding, and as such you are my, our, responsibility. I just wanted to be upfront with you about it, that's all. I took a sip from the wonderful tea and caught Sona nodding in agreement. That's a very generous offer. I set the tea down and locked eyes with Rias. And what would you want in exchange from your protection? Rias' eyes widened. What? I don't. My chuckle stopped her and I shook my head. Stop, Rias-san. You said it yourself. I'm not a fool. And I know for a fact that deals with devils involve something being exchanged. I know for sure that you are well intended and that you have my safety as your priority, but I saw the hope in your eyes when you realized that my boosted gear was one of the most powerful sacred gears in the world. So, what is it that you want from me? Rias' eyes were wide before she looked down at her lap, suddenly shy and nervous. I don't want to talk about it at the moment, she said, and I hear the slight despair in her voice. It amused me a little since she believed I was not going to help her because I was questioning her about it. Girls, men, I tell you. Always jumping to conclusions. Why are you so sad all of a sudden? I saw the other girls beginning to glare at me and hurried to elaborate. It's not like I'm not going to help you, since it is obvious you need help if this is your reaction to being reminded of the problem. The moment you warned me about me being in danger was the moment you earned at least a favor with me, even if you haven't offered me protection. I just wanted to know about it in case it was something outrageous like devastating a city or something like that. Please, Rias-san, smile again. You look more beautiful when you do. Rias looked up at me in surprise, and she wasn't the only one. I shrugged at their looks. I like to help people with their problems, even more when they are willing to look out for me like gals are doing. I don't have problem with helping as long as it is not something involving killing someone without reason. Tsubaki rose an eyebrow. Without reason? I nodded. If there is a definite and unquestionable reason to end the life of a piece of shit that only contributes to the worsening of society, I'm more than willing to do the deed myself, eagerness depending on the reason. There was silence for a moment before Akeno spoke softly. You've killed before. I didn't know if killing something that was already dead that just came back to life but still mostly dead counted, but I think it did. I have, yes. And while I don't feel proud about it, I can sleep soundly knowing that the ones I've killed did messed up shit in their worthless lives. They nodded in understanding and I smiled at them. So, devils, huh? Sona nodded. Yes. Rias and I belong to 2 of the 72 most prominent houses of the underworld, called the 72 Pillars of the Underworld. Also, we are kings of our own peerages, a system for reincarnating humans into devils based on chess pieces. Our race took a lot of damage in the previous Great War, and this way we can repopulate back. I nodded in understanding, even if I already knew that. I get it. It would be sensible to think that you wanted to offer me protection in the form of me joining one of your peerages to deter the fallen angels from approaching me or harming me, right? Rias shook her head. While that crossed our minds, and we're going to offer you that option, it is ultimately your decision. It will be easier to protect you that way than, say, having to send people of our own to keep an eye on you 24/7. We are willing to do that, but if you were a member of a peerage, we can teleport directly to you in an instant should you be in danger. I could see she wanted me to join her peerage, and the perks of being a devil are way too good to pass up, and I doubt I'll suffer the same weakness since I was a dragon-human hybrid already. The problem is, Sona continued, that we are not sure if that will be enough to stop the fallen angels from doing whatever they wanted to do with you. A situation like that could escalate quickly and be what triggers another war, and that is something we just don't have the luxury to afford happening. I shrugged my shoulders. The solution is easy. I won't join any of your peerages. I saw the protest coming my way and I rose a hand to stop them. I really appreciate your concern, and I know it is genuine, and for that reason, and don't want to cause you the stress of possibly being the reason of the start of a new war. You did enough by warning me of what was happening, and thanks to Diedrich I know I am capable of defending myself. Rias pouted, and that made me want to kiss her. I really wanted to join my peerage. I won the right from Sona in a chess match that lasted 12 hours. I chuckled at the sour look in Sona's face and I shook my head. I only said I'm not willing to join now because of what might happen. When I solve this issue, and if you manage to convince me that being a devil is more worthwhile than be a human with draconic characteristics, then I'm all for it. Ever since I discovered my powers, I realized that I wanted to be strong enough to protect my ability to have fun. Selfish and childish, I know, but that, along with the safety of my mother, is what matters the most to me. A half-truth at best, but I know it will work with them. Sona nodded in understanding. We devils are creatures of desire and ambition. If what you desire is to always be able to pass a good time without it being jeopardized and protect your family, I can respect that. If you join Ria's peerage, you'll be technically her servant, and while most devils do treat their peerage like slaves, I saw the four of them twitch in irritation, and I was sure they were thinking about a certain phoenix. Was Riser worse here than in the light novels? Our families believe in that we need to treat our peerage members as if they were our own family. There would be some rules you'll have to follow and tasks you'll have to do as a devil, but other than that you can do whatever you want. Rias continued. The pros surpass the cons by a lot. As a devil you'll have a weakness to light, be it light magic, the day, and holy artifacts. But other than that there isn't another thing necessarily bad when you become a devil. Lower inhibitions, a tougher body depending on the piece that is used to reincarnate you, increased stamina, increased power growth rate, night vision, the ability to fly, and you already can use magic power, so that will be just enhanced. I chuckled in a slightly perverted manner as I gave the four of them a lustful look, drinking in their literally sinful bodies displayed in sexy school uniforms. Alright. You had me in the lower inhibitions and increased stamina part. I'm in after I deal with the fallen angels myself so a war doesn't start. I chuckled as Rias, Sona and Tsubaki flushed red and squirmed in obvious arousal, knowing what I was implying with that. Akano for her part licked her lips sensually before she winked saucily at me. That sexy minx. That reminds me that I have a date with two lovely girls, and it would be rude if I kept them waiting. Sona was still blushing, but she gave me a skeptical look. I thought you were going to stop being perverted. I shook my head as I stood up, grabbing my bag and settling it over my shoulders. I said I was going to stop being blatant about it. There is no problem with being a pervert in private or in my mind. For example, I smirked cheekily at them. I know what you four are think about me right now. I know that is probably more perverted than what I am thinking about you, and I know that I don't mind one bit. Their entire faces became red at the moment, even Akino's, and I chuckled again. I shook my head and turned around and walked towards the door. The barrier shimmered down and grabbed the doorknob before turning towards them with what I hoped was a sensual smile. As a matter of fact, it makes me look forward to becoming a devil so we can all reap the benefits of that. Won't you agree? With that said, I slipped out of the room. After the door closed, I heard Akano groaning in want before she whispered. I'm so fucking him once he becomes a devil. I have dibs, you three. You can have him after he ravishes me. I will be next. Rias said. That's not fair, Rias. I want him too. That was Sona. Akano. Would you mind sharing your dibs with me? And that last one was Tsubaki. I smirked and shoved my hands into my pockets. I was the man. I really wanted to include Issei's date with Mina Murayama and Miko Katase in the following threesome, but I got excited and ended up writing 12k words before that. I promise that next chapter will include that. Hana finally given to her desires for who she believes is her son and the start of the canon timeline. I hope you liked what I did with the boosted gear and what are going to be Issei's, OC's main combat magic powers. At the moment Issei, OC is on par with Kiba and Kaneko without using boosted gear, and he can easily beat Rias and Sona if he uses boosted gear to its current limit. Review, please. Love y'all. The Badass Writer. First, previous CH4 of 10.